If we could take our final seats, please. I've got a technology crash. I may need to overlook the agenda. Good evening, councillors, members of the public, officers, those that may be joining us on the webcast. I'd like to welcome you to this meeting of the Maidstone Joint Transportation Board, today the 10th of July 2019, being held here in the Maidstone Town Hall. Very briefly, the usual housekeeping. No planned fire drills. If you hear such a thing, please follow the instructions of Mr. Nash, who is seated to my right, and he will guide us on evacuating the building. I'd also like to remind you that tonight is broadcast live and recorded for playback. But I'd also like to ask if anybody else is intending on recording. And I'm asking that not to prevent you, but just so that others in the room would be aware that that is the case. And I see no indications. And needless to say, if you've got telephones and other magic digital devices, please could you switch them to the silent mode. With regard to the running order of business this evening, I do intend to take item 13, the 20 mile per hour policy review, ahead of item 12, which is a reference from Maidstone Borough Council regarding an implementation of a 20 mile an hour limit. The reason for this is that item 13 does set context for item 12. I also intend to take item 18, which is objection to traffic regulation orders, ahead of item 14, which is a verbal update for Leeds Langley. A member of the public has registered to speak, and it is therefore appropriate to consider this early on the agenda. So that will be item 18 ahead of 14. Moving to the agenda, I'll take apologies for absence, please. I have Councillor Sams, Councillor Powell and Stockel.
Chairman, I've left the meeting with the leader of Kent County Council. He may still be at the meeting. He was intending to be there.
Okay, thank you for that. Accordingly, I'm going to ask if there are any substitute members. Councillor Mrs. Gooch.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Mrs. Gooch, substituting for Councillor Tom Sams. I give my apologies. I do need to leave at about 7:05 for a Barming Parish Council meeting. My apologies.
No other substitutions. We're at agenda item 3, the matter concerning urgent items. I've accepted an urgent item and an urgent update this evening. So item 18, objections to traffic regulation orders, has been included as an urgent item in the amended agenda. And the reason for urgency is that the recommendation is required from this meeting in order to ensure that the projects are not delayed. There's an urgent update, which is Appendix 7 to item 15. This has been included as an urgent update in the amended agenda. The reason for urgency is that the appendix is referenced in the covering report and needed to be made publicly available to ensure transparency. Agenda item 4, the notification of visiting members. Can I ask that visiting members come to the free microphone so that they're recorded? I'd also ask you to indicate if there are any items upon which you wish to speak.
Okay, yeah, Councillor Harper in items 12, 13, 15 and 16.
Thank you. Councillor Atkinson for the same items as Councillor Harper. Thank you.
Which I have as 12, 13, 15 and 16. Yes. Can't see any other visiting members. Thank you. Item 5, the matter of disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures, please? Nobody indicates, therefore none are recorded at this time. Similar question at item 6, disclosures of lobbying. Are there any disclosures of lobbying? I'll say for myself, I've been lobbied on the TROs. Does that apply to everybody or just some? Okay, I'll take the other lobbying
I was
from...
just going to say, at some time or another, I think most of us have probably been lobbied on the junction improvements.
Would members be satisfied if I recorded that for all present? Yes. Are there any other specific lobbyings? Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. I've been lobbied on item 16, which is the Hermitage Lane one, although I may not be here by the time we get to it.
Councillor Bird similarly indicating. Councillor Hodson. Likewise for yourself. Councillor Hinder.
Thank you, Chair. Item 12.
Item 12.
Yeah, and Hermitage Lane.
Hermitage Lane for Councillor Kimmins. I think we have all of that, but if any of you realise something further. Councillor Bird.
Sorry, Chairman. Also item 12, the speed limiting fund.
Oh, very good, that's noted. So if any of you realise anything, please indicate at the beginning of the item. Yes, Councillor Daly. Councillor Mrs Prendergast.
I think it would be prudent to say that I've been lobbied on item 11, which is the work programme. Thank you.
Prudence is always best. Thank you. I'll close that item. Item 7, exempt items. There are no yellow papers in front of us this evening. I therefore move that the items on the agenda be taken in public as proposed. Is that agreed, members? Thank you. At item 8, we can consider the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of April 2019. They're circulated with the papers. I trust that you've had opportunity to review them. Are there any matters of inaccuracy that anybody wants to raise? Therefore, can I have your agreement that I sign them as a correct record? Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 9, the presentation of petitions. There are no petitions this evening. Item 10, question and answer session for members of the public. There are no questions this evening. We'll now take agenda item 11. This is the Transportation Board work programme. Mr Nash, is there anything you wish to advise us of?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just a quick note that the TRO item is currently listed as number 9 on the work programme. It's been accepted as an urgent item for today, therefore I'll be taking it off of the work programme.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Prendergast.
Thank you, Chairman. This is becoming a habit again, isn't it? Speaking
2 nights in a row,
yes. 2 nights in a row. I just want to make a comment on item 2, which is the A20 Harwich scheme. It says on this report that this was requested by Councillor Tom Sams, which is quite correct, but it has been raised by me in the past and I wanted it on the work programme. And I just want to point out that I was really disappointed a couple of weeks ago to receive an email from Councillor Sams, which he received from the clerk to this committee, saying that following discussions between the chairman of this committee and myself, this item had been withdrawn from the agenda because it had been resolved. I've asked for it to come back on. It's by no means resolved. It's a scheme that's taken place over a considerable amount of time. It's been going on for over a year. We find that phase 1, although all the Section 106 monies have now been collected, the scheme is yet to be completed. We're still waiting for phase 2. There is a significant financial gap to bridge. So we find ourselves in a situation where that part of the highways, which is now reduced to 30 miles an hour, has no street lights, and that section has not been resurfaced.
Okay, without...
No, but what I want, I know that I'm only going to get a brief verbal update on this if I get anything at all, but I would like it to come back to the next meeting with a full report, and I'd also like to see something, a recommendation in there somewhere to come back to your committee, strategic planning, to see if that funding gap can be bridged via SIL contributions, because it really is a vital piece of infrastructure that needs to be completed. That's all I'm saying at the moment. Thank you.
Absolutely no problem with that going back into the work programme, and I do apologise if its withdrawal was confused with another item. That was not intentional in any means whatsoever. With regard to your consideration to the other committee, perhaps it might be worth submitting a question or a statement directly to that committee by yourself if it meant it could be brought forward sooner rather than waiting for a reference from this board. Just a suggestion. You're always welcome, Mrs. Prendergast. Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, there's clearly an overlap between item 6, which I requested, and item 1, which Councillor Prendergast has requested. Although item 6 does also cover the 229, I note that we are expecting Highways England to come here, join us on the 16th of October. Can I please request that Highways England address items 6 and 7 at the same time, please?
We can certainly request the request. I've no power to enforce them to do so, but we can make that matter known to them in advance, yes? If there are no other matters to raise in the work programme, is that noted, members? Thank you. So as indicated previously, we'll move to agenda item 13, 20 mile per hour policy review, and I shall ask Mrs. Arnold to start the item off.
Thank you, Chairman. This report provides an executive summary of Kent County Council's 20 mile an hour policy review as information to councillors to assist them in future consideration of potentially implementing 20 mile an hour speed limits in Maidstone. The 20 mile an hour policy review went to Environment and Transport Cabinet Committee on the 24th of May 2019, and it proposed some amendments to the previous policy. The review was undertaken to ensure that Kent County Council's approach to setting 20 mile an hour speed limits was up to date and in line with the latest guidance. The review proposed some enhancements to the current approach in setting the limits and also looked at associated supporting engineering measures to achieve compliance. The review recommended that a number of pilot schemes be trialled to understand the effectiveness of these more innovative traffic calming measures at certain locations. Potential methods to be trialled include centre-line removal, bus build-outs, on-street parking bay modifications and gateway features. In addition to being lower in cost, these also provide a more psychological perception to encourage a reduction in vehicle speed through changing the driver's perceptions. The policy review proposed a two-stage approach, verifying community support for the 20 mile an hour speed limits, including a scheme sponsor, which could be parish councils, county members, borough council members, but also verifying the local benefits for the need for a 20 mile an hour speed limit. KCC proposed to trial schemes across the county where these schemes adhere to the following two-stage processes. At this stage, KCC have yet to decide where these pilot locations will be. However, the intention is that once these pilot schemes have operated for 12 months, a report will go back to their Cabinet Committee, and again, that's reliant, the timing of this report will be reliant on implementation and the timings for that. One thing we have agreed is that it will come back to this committee as well as an update in terms of how the policies, the pilots have operated. At this stage, there isn't a defined process for how you will be able to submit schemes. However, if you do email through to the traffic schemes email box, they will assess them alongside the other schemes across the county. Thank you.
Thank you for your introduction. I have two visiting members that have indicated on this. Councillor Harper, I'll take you first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In terms of this new approach, it seems obviously quite sensible and much easier potentially to actually bring in 20-mile-an-hour limits if you don't have to go through such so-called intrusive traffic calming measures. I think I emailed most of the committee members present tonight to ask them to consider presenting Fant as a pilot area. I think looking at this report and listening to the officer, the request from the residents of Fant, which was signed by over 800 residents, which demonstrates your number one, which is community support, would meet very well with this type of pilot scheme where we have in Fant, we have on-street parking now, so modifications to bays and so on could be included in a measure there. We have gateway features. There are only a handful of roads into the whole of the Fant area. It's pretty well self-contained, being the area of Maidstone between the Tunbridge Road and the Medway, with only one or two roads going in or out. And it has buses travelling through on its main road through the area. So it meets all of the issues you're talking about potentially in 4.4 as new ways of looking to help work a 20-mile-an-hour area. So as I say, since we've been told this evening that we haven't yet determined where they would be, I would ask that this committee potentially recommend to KCC that Fant be considered to be one of the pilot areas. Thank you.
Councillor Atkinson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can't add much to that except to say that over 800 people signed our petition, 800 people from Fant, so there's clearly a community need for the 20-mile-an-hour limit. And as has been said, there's only about 7 roads which lead into Fant, so we'd only need 7 20-mile-an-hour signs for the entries into Fant. So the actual cost, when it's actually implemented, will be quite minimal. So that is, in our view, a prime site for this experiment to proceed. So thank you.
Thank you. First indication, Councillor Clark, I'll start and then work clockwise around the room.
Thank you, Chairman. I welcome any less intrusive intrusion into implementing these schemes. A classic example was Northumberland Road, where I was, as a county member, I was involved in implementing a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit along the shops by the zebra crossing. And quite bizarrely, we chose to do the speed survey along by Greenfield School as it came out onto Northumberland Road, because we thought it would be best for safety to extend from the shops all the way to where children would be crossing. Unfortunately, under the previous system, the traffic survey failed and would not receive police or officer support without traffic calming measures, which there wasn't the funding for. So we did a very much more limited scheme by the shops. And I really do think it was folly that we couldn't have extended to actually bring into that scheme the area where the children cross. So I very much welcome this. I think that we should have more 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. There are many places where, Northumberland Road, for instance, you have flats on one side, you have the shops on the other, you have high road traffic incidents where children run across the street. We've had one suggestion this evening about Fant, but I've submitted 3 schemes for the pilots, and one of those is in Armstrong Road, where there is a very high level of road traffic accidents for a side road. It's one of the highest incidents of road traffic accidents for any side road in Maidstone, and that is because you've got parks on both sides of the road, you have children running between them, and you have a large housing site. Again, children will run from the housing towards the hockey park. So I think I think many members are going to be submitting their views on this, and I hope we can have some good pilots going forward.
Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Chairman. I get a little bit nervous when Kent Highways start talking about personal injury and collision rates, because all too often they look at recorded data, and the recorded data is only recorded if it's been recorded by the police or a highways officer has been involved. But we all know that the majority of incidents on the road do not get reported to the police or do not involve highways officers. So whilst I welcome this report in general, I do feel that we need to look at this in terms of improving the ambience of the highways environment. In other words, reducing the potential for accidents or collisions rather than the reported rates, which has historically often been the case. Because I know that in the past, when councillors have put forward schemes, the first thing that gets looked at is the crash data, and that says nothing. So I am a little bit uneasy about the second point in paragraph 4.5, but overall I support the scheme. The other point I would want to raise is a little bit more clarity, if we've got it, and I don't know if the KCC officers here can assist Ms. Sarnold. You know, how will the pilot sites be determined? It seems to be a very obscure process. Thank you.
Mrs. Arnold, can you help with any of that?
I certainly respond to your first question. I mean, within the overall review, one of the key parts of this two-stage process is looking at the local benefits. So it is broader than just the crash statistics. It is looking at improving the overall road environment. It is looking at trying to create an environment where people feel more comfortable walking and cycling, etc. And my understanding is that the Transport Innovations team may well be involved from an active travel strategy point of view as well, to try and bring about the broadest benefits that are able to come forward on this. In terms of how the various schemes will be assessed, unfortunately, my KCC colleague is sat in the audience, so I don't know if he's able to come and sit in Brendan's seat, or Jamie might be able to respond. But I think at the moment it is just getting all the submissions in, and then they'll be looked at to try and provide the greatest variety of pilot cases. And there is limited funding available from the local transport plan funding, but I understand as well if there are things like member grants available, that would enable more schemes to potentially be trialled. But Jamie Watson may be able to provide a greater clarity.
Mr. Watson, if you could.
I probably don't need to add any more. That's spot on. We are getting a lot of requests at present. We haven't worked out exactly all the criteria involved, but we're doing that at present. So in the very near future, we'll be in a position to gather all of those requests, assess what's needed. There's no limit to the amount of pilots. It's probably the limiting factor is the finances available. But I can assure all members that we will be looking at that, and very shortly we'll have an update as to the criteria. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for your response. Councillor Daly. Can I just check and see if your microphone is actually working, Councillor Daly? Could you try the spare microphone to your left?
Yes, I'm sure. I'm sure, yes. Well, everything I'm going to be saying, hopefully, is common sense. Basically, let's go back to the beginning then. The roads in Fant are very narrow, basically because they were built in Georgian and Victorian days. 30 miles an hour in them, if achievable with all the parked vehicles, is too fast, much too fast. It is an area which is easily zoned.
Apologies for interrupting you. Is this of the broader impact on 20 mile an hour, or is this specifically?
No, it's to do with Fant, actually.
Can I ask you to hold your thunder, and we'll take that on the next item where we will specifically look at the Fant petition?
Yes, of course.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mrs Gooch.
Thank you, Chairman. And in fact, please put me right. Is this the right point for me to ask exactly who should people write to if they wish to be one of the pilots? That's not here, but we might as well hit it now.
Mrs Arnold, could you spell that one out?
My understanding is if you send it through to the traffic scheme's general email address, it will all be looked at in totality. I can circulate that afterwards, or we can make sure it's included in the minutes, perhaps.
Yes, we'll make a specific addition to the minutes. Councillor Wilson.
Chairman, bearing in mind that this is considered, I think, this new way of looking at 21 mile limits is a good thing for all, particularly communities, and safety. What consideration has been given to actually introducing 20 mile limits to new developments as a condition to a new development, whereby it would be the ideal situation in terms of housing, in terms of pedestrians, in terms of cycling, and also in terms of costs being done right at the beginning by the developer?
Mrs Arnold.
My understanding is this hasn't been specifically looked at in terms of the overall KCC policy, because this... So my understanding is this hasn't been looked at as part of the overall KCC policy, because this is more around existing roads. However, SPI have taken an item previously on 20 mile an hour speed limits, and one of the things we resolved was to advocate 20 mile an hour speed limits as good design in new residential schemes. And again, that will be something we will look at again as part of the local plan review.
I mean, yeah, thank you. But how can we expedite that? Because this development is imminent, and it needs, if it's going to be looked at, it doesn't want to be sort of in the far future, it wants to be in the near future.
Sorry, could you just clarify which development you're referring to, which is imminent?
All.
If there are imminent developments and they're being considered by planning application, you can, of course, make representations on that planning application to that effect. So the quickest way to expedite that would be to make contact with the planning department at Maidstone Borough Council to have that view put forward.
Sorry, I beg to differ. I'm talking in terms of policy. That we know that any new development requires safety measures. It's an ideal time to actually put in a 20 mile an hour limit as part of a KCC condition, if you like, a highways condition. Can that not be looked at? I mean, because in terms of cost, it would be borne by the developer, and to me, it would be an ideal time to be putting in something which we're all saying is a good thing.
Thank you very much. Yes, in terms of policy creation, we have to go through as an authority quite a lengthy procedure to get those policies in place. It isn't something which can be brought in now because it's a review has taken place in terms of 20 mile an hour zones, for example. What we can do is start to gather evidence towards policies, and in fact we are undertaking a public consultation on our local plan review at Maidstone, which will be starting on the 19th of July and going on until the 30th of September, on the scope of the local plan review and the matters that are to be considered as part of that. And it may well be an ideal opportunity for you to make a representation in that regard to see if we can incorporate those sorts of measures into the local plan review, the forthcoming review. But what I want to just say is that we don't get the policies in place immediately. It won't be this year. The local plan review is due to be adopted by 2022, in fact, because we have to go through a set procedure which is dictated by the government. Thank you.
Chairman, I'm really sorry to say it. That really is the kind of mumbo-jumbo, bureaucratical reply that I don't like. You know, I really would like to say that I'm making a very simple, crucial point and asking you to leave this meeting and go back, if you haven't already done so, and take it up. I'm not to tell me that, you're starting a public consultation in September, which will take till October, and then you might be looking at it in the next 2 years' time. I'm just making the point. If you could say to me, yes, you've made a very good point, Councillor Wilson, I will take it away and raise it with the authority concerned.
Thank you for that, Councillor. There is no mumbo-jumbo in what I'm saying. I am not in control of the procedures for creating policies. You're referring to creation of policy. That is set out in government, not local requirements. We have to go through a process to get those policies in place. And of course, we will consider what you're saying. But in terms of policy, which is what you have specifically referred to, that is a detailed, lengthy process which we must comply with government requirements.
Meanwhile, I think the best route to take, Councillor Wilson, is probably directly to Highways, perhaps with your county members' involvement on specific applications. Moving along, Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I agree with what you just said. I think the simple thing is when the 20-mile-an-hour pilots come back to be reviewed, as part of that, we could ask county, if it's been successful, as a matter of policy, to adopt a policy that includes exactly what you just said, Councillor Wilson. So I think from this side we could do that. I do think this is a good thing, but I do think members need to remember that these are pilots right the way across the whole of the county. This is not just something for Maidstone. It will be limited. But there are some things that we can do as individuals and members, and I'm hoping, as Sue Laporte knows, that Downsford will be one of the areas that's considered for a pilot. We've already done the speed surveys on 4 locations. We've already got the public engagement, which has been incredibly supportive, and we've got the feedback and the data from those surveys that ticks the boxes there. The report says that a traffic survey is likely to be around about 300 per location, although this can vary. You don't do one location, you need to do at least 3 or 4, and there are companies that will do a block amount for a certain period, so it's quite a lot cheaper than that. And I would suggest that anybody who wants to do this should talk to their county member and get them on side to promote it with our officers at county, and maybe look to get some funding from the county members' grants.
Good advice, Councillor Cook. Councillor Wilby.
Common sense, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. Just quickly to go with Councillor Wilson's thing. I know we did have an SPST a few years back about the 20-mile-an-hour on new developments and didn't go through, but I would say that when people do sign up to the PPAs, the planning department do try and encourage them to do 20 mile per hour by design. Unfortunately, Highway doesn't always back it up, but they do try. So just to try and react that we do try to do that.
Thank you. A second go, Councillor Bird. Short one, no doubt.
It is short. I just like to take up Councillor Wilson's point. It is actually a question I explicitly asked of the then Cabinet Member for Environment and Transport at KCC about 5.5 years ago. The concept was rejected at the time. I think we all recognise that times have moved on, thinking has moved on, and if Mr. Wilson, Councillor Wilson would appreciate it, I will happily raise the issue again.
Thank you. Councillor Daly, did you want to speak on this item at all, or you?
Yes, Chairman. It was really basically that when these limits were set back in the 1930s, I mean, traffic was totally different from what it is today. And I'm amazed, actually, that things have not been altered to satisfy the differences in traffic that we have today. We all know, do we not, from what we see around us, that if you've got a 30-mile-an-hour limit, a lot of people travel at 35 and 40 miles an hour. And if you reduce it, it's psychologically so that people will reduce anyway relating to that. If there were all blanket 20-mile-an-hour limit zones in residential areas, that indeed would be progress. And I understand what's being said. It takes a period of time to get it in order. You write the policy, you then ask people to actually accede to it. And I know that that's the system that's got to go through. But unless you start somewhere, and this is where the common sense sets in, because we know that that is the way forward that needs to be done, but it can only be done legally and get some legal backing towards it. But if we don't start now thinking that that is the right way to go, commonsensical way to go, we'll never get any progress at all. Because the costs of putting these things in, you know, road humps and all that sort of thing is a very expensive business to do, and it's not comfortable to travel over road humps. But whether you zone places or where you have a blanket mile-an-hour limit, I think the blanket residential 20-mile-an-hour limit is the way to go. That then covers everybody, and you don't have to start zoning and getting people to have differentials. That's all I wanted to say on this. Thank you, Chairman.
Final word on this item, if you want, Councillor Wilson.
That's very kind of you. Yes, I mean, I accept all that's been said, and I think basically everybody's very much on side. The point I'm trying to make really is now is the time to be talking about it in terms of policy, and I do understand it's very, very difficult to do that, but let's talk about it now.
Thank you. Members, we're just asked to note this report this evening. Is it noted? So now to agenda item 12, which was the reference from Maidstone Borough Council, implementation of a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit in Fant. Councillor Harper, you're down as visiting member to speak on this. Would you like to take that opportunity to introduce this item?
Right, thank you. This petition was presented to Maidstone Council back in April. It was signed by about 860 people altogether, residents of Fant, almost one person per house in large parts of the ward. There is a massive concern in this area over a prolonged period of time in terms of speeding traffic. For people who know where Fant is, they will know, as Dan mentioned earlier, there's quite a lot of narrow roads, especially at one end of the ward, but it suffers also, as said in the council report, from a lot of rat running. The ward runs parallel to Tunbridge Road, and so you get, during the evening and morning rush hours and also school pickup times, you get a lot of traffic diverting from Tunbridge Road. From Barming, it goes down Glebe Lane and then through into Upper Fant Road and then coming out into the town centre gyratory on the other side of the river. And that traffic comes through very quickly, well over 30 miles an hour, down a road in Upper Fant Road, which is quite a difficult road because it's not that wide. It has parking intermittently on one side of the road, and so cars will tend to wait, and then when they see the next couple of yards, they will shoot through, and frequently, on a daily basis, we have cars travelling up on the pavement at over 30 miles an hour, where pavements are only in the order of 2 feet wide. There's been a number of cases of near misses of children. We have a couple of primary schools in the ward, one of which recently opened and is in the process of enlarging, the Jubilee School at Gatlin Lane. There's no 20-mile-an-hour restrictions and no traffic calming around that school. And only last year there was a number of near misses of pupils, where we're talking of kids from age 4 to 11. And it's unless something is done on some of these roads, it's going to be a matter of time before a young child is likely to be injured, if not lead to fatalities as that school expands. I said earlier, it's a fairly self-contained area, as it says in that report. Only 9 roads actually go into the area we're talking about, so it'll be a fairly easy area to control. And as I say, there's a long history of a demand from local residents there to see a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit put in. As I say, we've got at least one primary school with no 20-mile-an-hour speed protection. I would ask you to give serious consideration to this and sorry, consider it as one of your potential pilot schemes for looking forward, which might be the way to take this forward initially. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Atkinson. Okay, thank you. Nothing further to add from Councillor Addington. Councillor Wilson, you're indicating. Okay. Councillor Hodgson, you definitely are indicating. Can you indicate the microphone?
Sorry, so important. I see the content of this report, and in two instances it refers in some detail to Staplehurst. We must not get confused and mixed up here with some of the content in here. I paid for the speed surveys in Staplehurst. Not one resident, not the parish council, are pushing for or recommending 20-mile-per-hour speed limits in Staplehurst. Just need to make that clear, because the content in here adds to the argument. There are solutions which are put forward by highway officers which the parish council are now considering.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. I think we might have moved to a different agenda item during that little nap you just mentioned. We're on the Fant petition, but thank you. Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Chairman. 20-mile-an-hour speed limits in Fant. Well, I've been a councillor for the area for just under 7 years, and Councillor Daly for a few more years prior to that. And I think there has been a demand for 20-mile-an-hour speed limits within Fant, certainly all my time, and Councillor Daly might suggest for quite a lot longer than that. So it is welcome that this has come forward again, and it is again because it's something that many parties have campaigned for and many residents have campaigned for. So generally speaking, I'm supportive. I think we need to look very carefully at the costings. I mean, if Fant were to be accepted as one of the KCC pilots, that's great. Otherwise, then of course Councillor Daly and myself will have to see what money we've got left in our purses. And as my colleagues from KCC know, our purses are a little bit smaller this year. And we do have demands. I mean, there's a reference in the paper here to Buckland Hill and St Peter Street, where we have had incidents where children were physically injured. So that is a very pressing concern. And there are many other demands on our purse strings. But overall, I think there is a very strong case for this, and I certainly welcome it. I think Councillor Harper's point about the limited number of entries and egresses from Fant is well made. It is fairly self-contained. That being said, if we have to look at build-outs that will take up sort of bus parking bays and things like that, that will take out very valuable parking spaces which are incredibly short supply. The problem always with these schemes is enforcement. The majority of people in Fant do drive in the low 20 mile an hour. But there are idiots who will go up and down Gatland Road, Gatland Lane, Glebe Lane, Upper Fant Road at 35 to 40 miles an hour. And of course, we've talked many a time at this committee or this board about the lack of support that we get from the police in terms of enforcement. But I think we have to do what we can, and I welcome it. Thank you.
Sadly, a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit doesn't prevent the idiots that are doing 40 and 45. Councillor Daly.
Chairman, just very briefly, thank Mr. Bird for referring to this. In Upper Fant Road, we spent considerable amount of money on 2 interactive signs that flash at people if they're going too fast. The unfortunate thing about that is I'm not sure that we can either identify or even measure the number of times that people do slow down after they flash in their face. But that's not the point. My view is that if you really want to stop people from speeding, the type of camera that will stop them speeding is the type of camera which will record their speed and give them a ticket if they are going too fast. But the unfortunate thing about that is you can't have any of those put in place unless there are a series of accidents which cause the place to be named as a sort of a real danger spot. But I mean, it's just a question, again, of common sense. If you've got a speed problem and it needs to be enforced, and there aren't boys in blue standing with cameras on the side of the road, you need a mechanical method of doing it. So all I'm saying and suggesting is we must accede to the fact that there is a petition. And I think we need to respond to that. And having done that, then try to back that up with some other action. So what I'm saying is here, yeah, let's go forward with the acceptance of the petition and to put it forward through Maidstone Borough Council, then through highways. But if there's no means of getting a proper camera, a speed recording camera, that actually will issue tickets, then I don't really know that we're going to do other than just to make it psychologically a place where you don't go faster than 20 if the signs say that you shouldn't.
Thank you. Councillor Hodson, are you indicating? No. Okay. In order to bring conclusion to this item, I wonder whether a simple resolution that says this board recommends that a Fant Lane scheme be put forward for consideration as one of the pilots previously mentioned. A suggestion. Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Chairman. If you were prepared to propose that, I would be happy to second that.
I'm happy to propose that is seconded. Councillor Cook.
Chairman, I think the situation with these pilots is the pilots will go to KCC and be considered. And those that are given pilot status will go ahead, and those that are not will not. It's not. I do not believe that we are going to go through every single pilot and make a judgment that I don't think this is. I think a motion on the Fant and thing is frankly inappropriate. I think we just note the situation. I won't. Other than that, we should be saying that all the pilots and all the ones that people want to bring forward in Maidstone should come here to be endorsed, which is nonsense.
The words were carefully chosen such there is no endorsement, just that it should be put forward for consideration.
Noted.
But anyway, if there's not a proposed amendment to the motion as it stands, we should take a vote. Councillor Clark, I'll let you have the last word, then we'll vote.
I know that there are many different schemes that we could bring to this committee. We've brought a single scheme. It's been a good debate. It's gone beyond Fant. We've had a review of policy. I think members have been updated. They've become more aware of what we should be doing for our own areas. So I don't think it's unreasonable to put this forward for the pilot. And I think we don't need to do this for every other one, but I think it's been a good debate.
The words are carefully chosen. We are not putting it forward. We just recommend that it should be put forward for consideration, and I'm sure the movers of the petition would do so. Councillor Hodson.
Thank you. And I think Mr. Clark makes a bit of a point there. Now, I don't have any problem with this going through a scheme. I don't have a problem with 50 going through a scheme. But we're setting a precedent here. Every time we meet, are we going to have a similar one coming here? There's no need for it to come here. There is a process. Fant can lodge their application to, but are we going to have 3 next month, 4 next month? We say no, but do you govern that, Chairman, that people make an application, you say no, thanks very much, we're not going to entertain it?
So to be clear, the background of this was a 800-900 person petition that was presented at Maidstone Borough Council. It's outside of the remit of that council, and it was referred to this Joint Transportation Board. And of course, members, you are at liberty to discharge it however you see fit. There is a suggestion on the table, but amendment to that can be
Chairman,
made.
just, if I might, please. I think where we've looked at the policy of this and were required to and asked to note what KCC is doing in relation to these pilots, it seems logical that where, because this has not been dealt with as a petition that's been submitted to the JTB, it hasn't been dealt with in that way, it's just been referred to and it's come forward as an item. It seems logical that we should just note the report and move on. And that's what I would move if you want to move something.
Do you move an amendment that...
I move an amendment, Chairman, that the report be noted.
I'm just thinking procedure rules in my head. Because it's been seconded, it cannot take an amendment at this stage, so it would need to be defeated or withdrawn. I withdraw the motion. A fresh motion, someone?
Noted, Chairman. I move that the report be noted.
Councillor Mrs Gooch.
Thank you, Chairman. I understand entirely the points put forward here, and we must recognise that the feeling is so strong about this petition. I do agree, however, I think you've done the right thing to have it withdrawn, because it is not the remit of this JTB to say, yeah, all right, let's go for a blanket. I'd love to. I really support Fant, but this is not the place to do it. In the previous agenda item, I did actually ask the process of how to get your request considered for a pilot. So therefore, in withdrawing the motion, I would therefore propose that we note with great concern, we note the petition, we thank the petitioners, and strongly recommend that they submit an application to the traffic schemes email address that I haven't got yet.
I think it was misunderstood what was actually said. You know, the response was to the people that presented it, we recommend you put it forward as a pilot for consideration. But for simplicity, is the item noted? That concludes the item. Agenda item 18, objections to traffic regulation orders. Mr. Reynolds, would you be kind enough to introduce this to us?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to present this report of the objections received during the Kent County Council consolidation or weight restrictions variation 22. The report make recommendation to the board to consider objections received as part of the formal consultation process. Would you like me to go through them individually? No? In that case, the Joint Transportation Board recommends to the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee that the Kent County Council, as a highway authority, that the proposals for West End are not proceeded, the proposals for Patton Lane are not proceeded, the proposals for Church Green, Marden, are proceeded, the proposals for High Street, Marden, are proceeded, the proposals for Sovereign's Way, Marden, are proceeded, the proposals for Sutton Forge are proceeded, The proposals for Albion Road are proceeding, and the proposals for Chancery Lane are proceeding.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. I'm sure we'll be coming back to you if we require specific detail on any of those recommendations. We have somebody registered to speak. Councillor Mrs. Tippin from Maidstone Parish Council, if you could come to the microphone. And you have up to 3 minutes to address the board.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Kate Tippin, and I'm Vice Chairman of Maidstone Parish Council. Maidstone Parish Council has long been concerned about on-road parking in Maidstone and has sought to review and amend the current parking restrictions following research with residents and businesses via engagement in 2002, 2003, 2007, 2010 and 2016, and an open consultation morning in February 2018. We are pleased that a recommendation to approve has been made in all bar 2 of the proposals. We accept the recommendation that the altered timings in West End should not proceed, as our rationale for this change was to try to standardise no parking times across the village, but not to the detriment of local businesses where road safety is not the main issue. However, our rationale for proposing double yellow lines in Pattendon Lane is very different, being based on motorist and pedestrian safety concerns. In our 2016 questionnaire, 56 responses were received, with 89% of respondees supporting double yellow lines in this location. These responses are aligned to those received during previous public engagement events. There is an increasing volume of traffic using Pattendon Lane, especially as the lower part of the road is a designated employment area in the local plan. There is also increased pedestrian activity due to the 550 plus houses currently being built in Maidstone, and it is a key road which is crossed many times a day by pedestrians accessing the train station, primary school, preschool playgroup and children's centre. Currently, apart from a half-hour restriction between 9:30 and 10 a.m, there is nothing to stop cars being parked all day right up to the road junction with Church Green in contravention of the highway code. For pedestrians to cross the road, they have to weave in and out of parked cars, which obstruct their line of vision. Similarly, motorists face obstructions to visibility when turning at the junction and/or encounter oncoming traffic with limited room to manoeuvre, in both cases due to vehicles parked close to the give-way line. The objections to the draft TRO relate to one commercial premises, as their customers would be unable to park outside, although parking is available within a few paces in Church Green, Sovereign's Way and West End. Our proposals have been discussed with Councillors Burton and Hodson, and also Calc representative Councillor Brown. And I would ask members, when deciding on their decision, to consider which is more important, the safety of pedestrians and motorists, or the minor inconvenience for customers of a single commercial premises not being able to park immediately outside their door. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hodson.
Chairman, I reserve my right to speak after you and the officer present. I joke, of course. This is a difficult one on one of them, and the Vice Chairman of Maidstone Parish Council, who knows the patch better than most, has worked very hard, and you've heard evidence of the surveys and the questions which have been asked over the past decade of Maidstone. Time and time again, two members opposite have mentioned tonight evidence-based statistics for accidents, etc., etc. You know this junction better than most, Chairman, and officers have been out both from Maidstone Borough Council and Kent County Council. and everything was going swimmingly to the extent that the most recent survey carried out last year by Maidstone Parish Council and headed parking in our village came back with the responses which have been recited now. Not unusually, when the advert is advertised for the order, people perhaps say something which wasn't said previously, or they didn't make a comment. Now, I know this junction very well, and you've heard that I supported the cost of the TRO through my member grant. And the reason I mentioned very early on, Chairman, was that I'd been lobbied on 18. And of course, I've been lobbied by people who are objecting. And I don't have the evidence base that it's one commercial property, because more than one person has contacted me to say they are against this. And upon reflection, I'm in a difficult position because I would like to hear what the responsible officer has to say with regards to this application. And it would be ever so rude of me to sit on the fence and wait to hear perhaps what you say, because you have a more personal daily knowledge and represent Maidstone. I think I know where I'm going to end up, but it would help me make a decision if I certainly heard from the responsible officer. Thank you, Chairman.
As indicated, this particular junction, the Patterson Lane junction, is not only within my ward, but it's also at the end of the road where I work. So I go through this junction perhaps a number of times every day. If you look at the drawing for this junction, you will see a red line, which is meant to represent, as I understand it, the yellow lines. It's actually a very small length where that is proposed, and there is a lot of room either side of the red line that is a yellow line. I can't get past the piece in the Highway Code, Rule 243, that says do not park within 10 metres of a junction. Not to proceed with this particular measure will be effectively condoning permission to park in that manner. There is plenty of other space to park. If it's a matter of a staff car or two that is directly outside, I can tell you within less than 60 seconds walking distance, there are parking spaces available. At this stage, I'm minded to suggest that the Patterson Lane measure should proceed. I think we've heard that there's not support for the West End item. I don't think there's any great debate around that. Mr. Reynolds, is there anything further that you can add, confirm or otherwise, that I've got the red lines and the yellow lines correctly described?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Just a point of Eric Olsen. The double yellow lines at the junction were KCC. However, in a moment of weakness, I decided to add it to this order. So therefore, we're actually doing this order. The number of objections we received were 8 objections, 7 comments, which are all negative. So plus we had 2 support as well, which is the level that we would normally say we wouldn't want to progress it. I'm quite happy to progress it as it's a safety issue, but that was the original thing. But you're right, it is only a small section. It is from the junction to the end of the boundary of 2 Coronation Villas. That's probably in the order our length of time that is, and it's from Sovereign's Way up until West End as well. So it is quite a small section, but probably essential as a safety issue. But due to the level of objections, we have to consider that we need to withdraw that.
Councillor Bird.
Well, Chairman, we've had similar situations before with TROs. You get a petition and you get 100 signatures. And a case that Councillor Daly and I were involved in with Queen's Avenue. And then when you go for the TRO, you get half a dozen objections and only 2 people in support. That's the way of the world. But I would like to speak in support of the parish council and yourself. I do not live in Marden, it is not my division, but I do live nearby and I know this junction pretty well as I drive through on a fairly regular basis. It is a dangerous junction. It is a dangerous junction as a motorist because the visibility lines are so poor when there are parked cars there, which, as you say, are in contravention of the Highways Code. It is even more dangerous junction for any pedestrian trying to get from the northern part of the village to the southern part where the village hall is and the school. And it is even more dangerous, if I can add to the parish councillor's comments, not just for the pedestrians, but for those in mobility scooters and those with children in buggies towing along a 2 or 3-year-old to try and get their elder sibling to school on time, and they're having to dodge in between traffic. We should not accept this. It's very clear here in the risk management on page 64, this must be balanced against the risks involved in relation to road safety. And I think if we accept the recommendation not to proceed with Pattendon Lane, we are not doing our duty. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Brown.
Sorry, I 100% agree with Mr Bird. It is such a dangerous junction and it has got worse and worse over the years. Nobody takes any notice at all that it's against the highway code. I just think we've got to support double yellow lines here.
Councillor Hodson, I think you're reserved to speak again.
How kind. I know. Chairman, my mind was made up, but it was only right that I should hear your comments as the ward member and I should have clarification from the officer. I drive this route and have done for 50 years and it's got busier and I have never, as a personal driver, found it a dangerous corner. However, I accept what the survey went out to do, the majority of opinions. If I said no, I'd want my TRO money back, but I'm for the recommendation as amended, having spoken with the parish with regards to the one which now is, you accepted West End. So I agree with the recommendation, Chairman.
Would anybody like to make a motion? Councillor Bird? Do you want to address the block 1 to 8 in one go, or would members like to take them individually? One go, Councillor Bird, if you'd like to phrase an amendment, if you feel that that is appropriate.
That the Joint Transportation recommends to the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee and the Kent County Council's Highways Authority that all the proposals except item 1 of that for the West End proceed. No, all proceed except item 1.
No. All proceed except number 1.
Yes.
So number 1 is West End, do not proceed, but everything else, 2 to 8. That's how I understand what you're saying.
That's what I intended, Chairman. I think that's what I said.
Okay. So the motion is made. Is there a seconder? Councillor Wilby. Those in favour? And still counting. Keep your hand. Unanimous. Therefore carried. Thank you, members. Thank you. So now correcting the variation in order, we're back at agenda item 14. Mr. Borman, you're going to give us a verbal update on Leeds Langley Relief Road progress, I believe.
Thank you, Chairman. This may be a brief verbal update, but I'll give members as much information as I can today. Members are aware that significant traffic surveys were undertaken prior to Christmas for the Leeds and Langley Relief Road investigationary works. Those traffic surveys were collected and validated accordingly. We've recently had a number of scenarios tested in conjunction with that traffic modelling, and we are in a position currently with a draft report, and we are hopeful that we will have a final report in the very near future, which we will be able to share further information on the results of that particular piece of work that's been carried out.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Brown, are you? Councillor Hodson, are you? It's been a long day, has it, Councillor Hodson? Yeah. Councillor Clark.
Chairman, can I ask that we put a stake in the ground on the work programme for this?
Report in draft, something to bring forward. Could you give us a tentative date for that, Mr Borman?
Yeah, we're hopeful that a final report will be with us by the end of July.
We'll enter it in the work programme on that provisional basis, if that satisfies you. It's good to hear that there's progress. We look forward to receiving that, but for now, is that verbal update noted, members? Thank you. And so we find ourselves at agenda item 15. The floor is still yours, Mr Borman. An update, Maidstone Integrated Transport Package.
Thank you, Chairman. And with your acceptance, what I'd like to do is actually do a quick introduction to the report, and then I'd like to take members through each individual scheme rather than going through the whole lot and then having to come back, if that's okay with yourself. As members know from a previous report that was presented to the JTB, a decision regarding the release of the remaining local growth fund was announced by the CELEP Accountability Board back in April of this year, and as such we have progressed the design work accordingly on all of the remaining schemes that are contained within the Maidstone Integrated Transport Package. It's worth pointing out at this stage that public consultation on those remaining schemes will commence in September of this year. We're actually looking at doing it as a slightly different for the Maidstone schemes. We are going to have an individual Maidstone site within the Kent County Council consultation page. That will give a better and overall understanding for people that are actually looking at the consultation pieces and give them an understanding on the wider context of all the schemes that we're looking to progress as part of the integrated transport package. And I hope everyone can see that as a beneficial way forward to actually give a more rounded, wider picture to everyone that's actually looking at those consultation pieces. If I can start then on Cold Harbour. I know everyone has got it within their packs, but I'm going to bring it up on screen, and hopefully you will be able to see slightly better. Maybe not. How do I turn that round, Ben? Yeah, you turn it round. Make it short. So to start with, this is the A20 Cold Harbour roundabout scheme. We've discussed this previously at the board. This was what was known as phase 2, of the actual Maidstone Integrated Transport Package, and received endorsement, first of all, for release of CELEP funding. We've progressed quite well with this scheme, and there's been certain risks that we've actually managed to mitigate as part of the ongoing discussions with the local landowner, being RBLI. You can see from the plan, hopefully once my colleague tries to rotate it. If not, don't worry. We need a large section of land on the western side within the Royal British Legion Industries land to actually deliver this roundabout improvement. As previously stated in JTBs, this is a 100-metre diameter roundabout, so it's quite a size, and that's why we need their land to actually deliver this. We've actually come to an agreement, verbal agreement with them, and they are more than happy for us to proceed, that's right, in a way that we have previously discussed with them. Heads of terms are currently being drafted for the release of that land and the sale and the purchase thereof. And we move this forward through detailed design, which will hopefully be completed in September, October this year. We are then looking to go into our procurement phase with a contract award early in 2020 with a construction commencement of April 2020. Currently, we're looking at a delivery timescale of between 6 and 8 months, and that's predominantly because we can build a large section of this particular roundabout offline, and unusually for a highway scheme, it doesn't have a lot of interaction with utility companies and lengthy diversionary work, so we feel that we can deliver this one fairly quickly. Just a point of note on this particular scheme, we've had previous concerns regarding the removal of the existing signalisation on this particular roundabout, and part of the detailed design, we are now investigating and considering part-time signalisation as part of the detailed design phase, so hopefully that will allay some members' concerns regarding this particular scheme. As I say, this one's fairly straightforward in terms of highways deliverability, so we can't see this as any major issue, and therefore has been de-risked completely with the agreement of the land acquisition. So I'm happy to take any questions on this particular scheme first before moving on.
Councillor Daly.
It's on now. There we go. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, just wanted to say that I thank Mr. Borman for acceding to the request to keep at least some signalisation on that junction, obviously during the very heavy periods in the morning and the evening. I think that will go a long way to alleviating any concerns we had. Otherwise, it would be impossible to get out of Maidstone. I'm still pretty sure that that's the case. It's a massive junction, this, and I do hope and I pray that what he's planning will work. But the signalisation has been taken on board, and I thank him for that.
Any other comments, members? We can move on.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. So now moving on, probably to one of the areas where we felt had the most risk within the Maidstone Integrated Transport Package, and hopefully today that all members can see that we come today with a very good news story and something that we can actually look to be delivering as soon as we can. Part of the integrated transport package is the Lewes Road corridor. Now, the Lewes Road corridor is made up of 3 or 4 separate junctions. The Wheatsheaf Junction, which everyone knows, Armstrong Road, Shields Crescent, and Bourton Street and Bourton Lane and Cripple Street. Now, I'm going to start with the Wheatsheaf, which, in terms of progressing, we feel that we've now got a scheme that actually hits all of the targets that we were looking to achieve at the very start of the Maidstone Integrated Transport Package. We had 3 initial options for this particular junction. But the one that you see now on screen today is the one that we are recommending to take forward and the one that we will progress as part of the integrated transport package. Ultimately, what you see in front of you is a lozenge roundabout. The actual junction is signalised, which will allow us to control the traffic through that junction much more easily. This junction actually gives us spare capacity beyond the 2031 deadline period that we've actually been working to with all the other junctions within the Maidstone Integrated Transport Package, so that's really good news. One of the elements that we do have to raise at this point, obviously it does need the acquisition of the Wheatsheaf pub to construct, which has already been completed or is going through via the KCC property team. So the scheme that you see on screen today is without the pub. However, it does allow us some of the footprint still to enable us to put complementary planting, environmental screening from any of the noise or air pollution concerns that residents may have in that particular area. One of the other issues that is required with this particular scheme is the closure of Cranbourne Avenue. Now, I know this may not be well received in the outset, but what we are looking to try and achieve in that area of Cranbourne Avenue is a more enhanced street scene environment for people that actually live in that particular stretch of Cranbourne Avenue. So what we're promoting is actually not just the closure of Cranbourne Avenue, but to actually enhance that area of Cranbourne Avenue with this particular scheme. So hopefully we can see that as a real positive. One of the reasons why it does need to be closed is for the capacity improvements to be realised up to that 2031 and beyond, and also safety concerns with vehicles trying to then enter Cranbourne Avenue in a signalised junction. So that's one of the real reasons and the drivers for actually having that particular side road closed. We are aware that this may have a knock-on effect to other surrounding junctions, and already we've started work looking at the lower junction, or the more northern junction at Plains Avenue, and we are looking at the potential of signalising that particular junction to ensure that that is safe to do so for travelling public to actually exit that particular junction when the closure of Cranbourne Avenue is in place. So again, this is quite a good news story. It does mean that we don't need the acquisition of any third-party land apart from the pub. So again, that's actually really good news for us and for residents alike. So hopefully members can see this as a positive step forward. Just to give you an update on where we are regards to the programme, we are currently looking at completing the detailed design for this particular scheme in October of this year. We are also looking on a similar timescale to the A20 Cold Harbour roundabout, where we will go straight into the procurement phase, and we are looking to commence a construction. Now, this construction will be for the full package, so obviously when we let a contract, it will be for the whole Lewes Road corridor and not just individual junctions, to allow a contractor more flexibility and give us better cost efficiency of actually letting a contract of that scale. So we're currently looking at potentially a 12-month contract period, and that includes all of the junctions that I'm going to outline and detail today. So that's the Wheatsheaf junction. If anyone's got any particular concerns or questions, I'm happy to answer.
I do have visiting members wanting to speak on this item overall. Councillor Harper, you were waving your hand around. Is it very specifically this?
Yeah.
Okay, I'd ask you to be as succinct as you possibly can.
Thank you. Looking at the plans on the papers and obviously on the screen, there's a concern raised from the Maidstone Cycle Campaign Forum, which I'm the chair of, in terms of cycle provision at this junction, and also actually pedestrians as well, because obviously whilst this might well improve it for traffic getting through, We want to understand how the detailed design work between now and October will incorporate measures to improve it for cyclists and also for pedestrians. And just one last thing, I would say, whilst it might be good news for this junction, is it good news for the drinkers?
There's another one very nearby, apparently. Mr. Borman, a response?
Yeah, thank you for that. What I must say is obviously the plan that you see on screen is only the indicative layout that we've currently got. We've been working with our consultant on this and indeed local members, and we've identified the need for pedestrian crossings and also cycling facilities at this location, and we will be moving that forward within the next few months within the detailed design, so we can give confidence to members that actually that's been taken on board and that will be taken into account in the next stages of design.
Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Wheatsheaf Junction is slap bang in the middle of the area which I represent. And I have had a lot of conversations with Russell about this and wider highways team. I'm really pleased with what is being proposed here. It seems to answer the problems with capacity going forward in the best way that we can, frankly, with the width of the roads. I have had a concern with Cranbourne Avenue, as I'm sure others have. However, again, I've been working with Russell with this. We're looking at how we can mitigate the traffic which is coming from Shepway Estate onto this road. And all I'm asking now is, can you give me an assurance that going forward we will make sure we do more to ensure that any traffic which comes out of Shepway along Cranbourne Avenue will have safe passage through one of the other three potential routes?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Cooper. Yeah, absolutely, I can give you that confidence. As part of the overall wider picture for this particular scheme, we are extremely aware of the potential knock-on effects for the suggested closure of Cranbourne Avenue, and not only Plains Avenue, but we have been looking at other areas, and we're more than happy to continue working with you to make sure that we're jointly working together to come up with a solution.
Councillor Mrs. Prendergast.
Thank you, Chairman. I was really just going to support Mr. Borman when he says that this is a really positive step forward. I, as you know, have had an interest in this junction for many years on congestion and, more importantly, air quality issues. So if this goes in any way in resolving that, that's a plus all the way. And I know the subject of air quality is so important to both local authorities. It was discussed in this chamber last night. I know we, as a public health authority, take a great interest in it. The levels currently, well, the last recordings I saw are double the accepted levels, so anything we can do to mitigate that, as far as I'm concerned, is a positive. So it's a way forward. Thank you.
And Councillor Daly. Councillor Chittenden.
Thank you, Chairman. This isn't just a step forward, this is a big step forward. It's taken 4 years to get there and get to this stage, and I'm delighted that it's come forward. I think it's been looked at. My role over the 10 years I was a borough councillor was working with the other borough councillors who are there now, with the SMART group, with North Lewis Residents Association, and all of whom have put at various times suggestions and ideas, some of which are being taken on board. I assume we're not just talking about now just this section, but the whole section from down from Cripple Street right down to Howe Place, and that discussion. I think what we do with Plains Avenue is going to be very important, not necessarily for the people of Cranbourne, because I think they will have a quieter life, although not all of them will like it. But I think it is very important to people in Marion Crescent that they have a way, a sensible way in and out of that area. So what we do and lights sound a good idea in Plains Avenue, I think, is essential. I hope that at the time of public consultation we do have landscape and if you like, the niceties in place that they can look at, whatever happens to the area that's going to be left over when the pub is demolished, what happens down Cranbrook Avenue, and I think that needs to be in there as part of what residents can comment. I think there's still a lot of work to do on Cripple Street. I think there's only limited amount of work that can do there, but I was a bit concerned when one of the meetings at the Borough Council last night, I noticed on the infrastructure delivery that 3 sites in Bolton Lane were mentioned, which of course have been completely taken out by the... Sorry? Oh, sorry, are we doing Cripple Street separately? Oh, my apologies. I'll come back on that. Okay, other than that, it's an excellent start, and I think I look forward to seeing it going forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And just to give a little bit of confidence, obviously, part of that consultation package that's going out in September will include the landscaping design, and we're already looking at the landscaping actually on the Lozenge roundabout itself and the area where the remainder of the pub would have sat. So I can give members confidence on that. Moving on then, the next one within the report. Sorry.
I think we're to Councillor Bird.
Very briefly, Chairman, can I ask when this comes back that we do see the provision for pedestrians? And Councillor Harper made a very good point. It is always an issue with roundabouts. I mean, clearly this is a major step forward, but we must not forget pedestrians and cyclists.
I'm sure that is noted. Councillor Kimmets.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to ask the question, how many sets of or phases of traffic lights are there at the moment, and how many are there going to be on this scheme?
On the scheme currently, on the proposed scheme, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sets. However, that may seem a larger number than is existing currently, but with the interaction of the actual traffic signals, and what I must point out as well at this time is we're actually looking at integrating all of the traffic signals on this particular corridor, so not only at this junction, but Armstrong Road, Cripple Street, Borton, and thereon. We're actually looking at doing a fibre link together, so they actually work more intuitively together. But in answer to what I assume to be the concern is obviously the phasing is such, or the phasing will be such, that actually the timings on those traffic signals will give you green periods to allow a lot better flow of traffic than is currently being experienced by the existing traffic signals that are at that junction. So although we're at a very early stage of design, we've already looked at the implementation of the actual phasing of those traffic signals. So for argument's sake, if you were travelling northbound from the Lewes Road and wanted to make a U-turn round and go up the A274, the stacking in there, albeit isn't very great, you would get a green signal to allow that movement to be able to go round free flowing rather than being stopped at that particular junction. So in answer to the concerns, I think the phasing of the traffic signals will be far greater improved over and above what's already there, but obviously we can share that information as we move through the detailed design.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, that didn't answer the question I asked. I asked how many sets of phasing is there on the original set now, so that's how many different times the lights change, and how many on there.
It's a depth of questioning we could only get from a professional road user such as yourself. I don't think there's any further you can add, or it might be useful to also speak directly afterwards and just get a bit more detailed understanding. Councillor Kimmins.
Yeah, and it's not only that, it's because one of the reasons I'm asking is obviously you want to free up the flow of traffic, because that's the aim of the exercise. And if you're having exactly the same amount of phases on said traffic lights, then you haven't freed it up, because the traffic is still sitting there for the exact same amount of time, because you've got the exact same amount of traffic sitting there. And what will make it worse is you're cutting off Cranbourne Avenue, which I know very, very well because I lived 2 streets from there for 25 years. If you go in from Plains Avenue, then you're going to have to stick another set of traffic lights, which means more standing, and another set of traffic lights coming in from Plains Avenue. So to me, by cutting out Cranbourne Avenue, you're not going to improve the system at all. But it depends on how many phases of lights there are. So you can understand the question now, obviously.
Yeah, totally understand. And I think there's probably quite a detailed answer to that. And I would encourage you to spend a bit of time with Russell afterwards, if can be. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a highly complex junction. And I really do commend the work that the team have put in to bring this forward. Many people will be aware that there's a lot of concern about the closure of Cranbourne Avenue, but when the previous plan for closure had come forward, it was with the benefit of 18 seconds on the Lewes Road. And many people that were concerned about closure were specifically concerned that they really weren't getting anything in compensation of their closure. And I think this is actually bringing about significant benefits at the junction. I still do believe that as part of the consultation, there may be the possibility of an inward direction into Cranbourne Avenue, but we'll look to see what happens with the development from Cranbourne out to Plains Avenue. I know Plains Avenue very well. Residents have previously contacted me about the lack of ability to turn right in towards the town because traffic from this junction would back up and block it. So you've effectively got 4 lanes to cross. When I was a county member, I funded a box junction there, and that actually made quite considerable improvements. So I look forward to seeing how that scheme might come forward, because I think there may actually be some benefits for residents coming out of the junction at that point. I'm a bit concerned about an extra traffic light, but I think that this is definitely moving in the right direction. One thing as part of the briefing, I do feel there's also the opportunity, we've mentioned about pedestrians and cyclists, which we will see that detail as we go forward. My feedback as part of that was to keep the ability for cyclists to go into Cranbourne Avenue. There is a major connecting route from New Line Learning, Tiger, down the pedestrianised Pheasant Lane to this junction, and then cutting through Marion Crescent, through the cut and onwards towards town. There's also a connection from Lewes towards the grammar school using the same route. And officers have said that they will consider that, and that should be achievable with cyclists. So I certainly do commend this. I think my initial concern was to do with how similar it was to the previous scheme at the Wheatsheaf when we had a partial roundabout. But because this is signalised, we won't have the stacking and the blocking that will happen when cars come from the south to turn right, because both the junction actually directly at the Wheatsheaf and the one that's between the two, essentially through the roundabout, will be green together. So I think officers have done a very good job here.
Councillor Mrs. Gooch, I'm coming to you. Can I just quick question from me for that? And this kind of applies to all of the schemes that you're running us through, but this one in particular. In very basic terms, it meets the congestion issue that is currently there. It's got capacity to deliver the additional build that might still be in the current plan, or does it have anything left in it beyond that?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just in response then to your question, the modelling work that we've obviously carried out on all of our junctions within the MITP, we've taken the current local plan growth, so obviously it's everything contained within the current local plan, We've also added any background growth. So obviously there's national figures that are included with the background growth. They're all included within that. And this junction actually gives us spare capacity beyond 2031. So it's a real positive step forward for this particular junction.
I was hoping you wouldn't say that. Councillor Mrs Gooch.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just have reassurance, and I do commend the scheme. I can't quite believe that it's here. It's hard to believe that it's here at last. Hell of a lot of work. But I know the impact of Cranbourne Avenue being closed off will be quite immense for an awful lot of people. So, Mike, I'm really looking for reassurance that the mitigation, if you like, of the surrounding roads when you're putting in traffic lights and all sorts of things, that it happens, or I'm going to say at the same time, but what I'm trying to avoid is that the Wheatsheaf roundabout all happens wonderfully, but oops, you've forgotten all about all the other work that you're supposed to do to help it happen. Is it off? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, any work that we carry out on the surrounding areas will form part of the package. So that will be put in the contract documents for a contractor to deliver as part of that scheme. So although it will say the A229 Lewes Road corridor, it will include all the subsidiary work that we need to do in the surrounding areas. So it will be put out as one full package, and it won't be a piecemeal approach. It will be one person delivering the whole lot.
Very quick word, because we're going to move on to the next one.
Chairman, I think it's also worth pointing out that this actually de-risks the funding for the junction improvements, because very early on, when we weren't looking at the Wheatsheaf, there was the potential to require third-party land along frontages of houses, and that potentially would have put this as a very high risk of missing the deadline. So the fact it's actually deliverable and we can actually spend the money is also a great benefit.
Good point. Next one.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to move on to the A20 at the junction with Willington Street, if I can find the plan. So this, again, in terms of civils work, is actually a fairly straightforward junction improvement. We looked at a number of options for this particular junction. We've looked at a roundabout option, we've looked at a smaller signalised junction, but the one that you see on the screen and within your pack is the one that we are progressing forward. Ultimately, what you're getting is increased capacity on the Ashford Road itself coming...
Can I just ask you for a pause for a second, Councillor Bird? You're indicating frantically. It must be really important. Okay.
Please excuse me. I shall go on to... Here we go. So, moving down the Lewes Road corridor, this is actually Armstrong Road at the junction with Park Way. Again, this is a fairly straightforward improvement. What happens currently is anything exiting Maidstone, travelling south on the Lewes Road, gets held up by people trying to turn right into Armstrong Road itself. So this proposal actually sees the swapping of the existing pedestrian crossing to the other side. So it goes from the northern side to the southern side, which allows us capacity to put in a dedicated right turn lane, which will free up the two straight-on lanes for people travelling in a southerly direction along the Lewes Road. So that's pretty much it for this particular junction improvement. What we are promoting as well as part of this scheme is to give some additional capacity actually on Parkway itself. There's a fairly large grassed verge which is owned and maintained by Highways currently, and we are proposing to widen into that grass verge to give us a dedicated straight on and a dedicated left turn on Parkway. Also, in conjunction with this, and it's having some early discussion with some of the local members, and I think Mr. Clark has already raised this regarding 20 mile an hour, which obviously we've spoken about previously. Armstrong Road, they have felt that requires a 20 mile an hour, and we have said that we would potentially look at that proposal as part of this scheme and the implementation of that moving forward. So again, this is a fairly straightforward, easy, quick win junction improvement that we can deliver as part of the overall package.
Councillor Clark.
That's me.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Chairman, this is something that we have been working with highways for some time now. We've actually had instances where when we've blocked off the lane heading northwards towards Shields Crescent, we actually find the traffic flows much better where you have a single lane going into this junction and a single lane going through and all the way round Shields Crescent. So that essentially shows that a single lane coming down is a single lane coming down into two gives a redundancy which we can use for the turn lane into Armstrong Road. So I thoroughly welcome this. One point that I did mention to Russell was the fact that we will be losing a tree on Parkway, and I had asked that that be replaced as part of the scheme. And also along the Armstrong Road northern side we have a hazard at the moment where cars mount the pavement when there's a stack of traffic turning right towards the southern side of Lewes Road. And officers have said that they could incorporate bollards to stop the mounting of the traffic at that time, but it's a very good scheme.
No indications, please move on.
Thank you. Moving on. We now. Okay, so this is Borton Lane and Cripple Street. Now this has proved to be quite a challenging junction to actually solve, and indeed I feel that potentially we need to undertake some more work on this particular junction. But obviously we are showing this today for members for comment and any feedback that they may have. Predominantly we are using land on the eastern side of the Lewes Road to actually widen out to the junction of Cripple Street and Borton Lane. By doing so, that actually gives us more capacity when you're travelling up towards the Wheatsheaf Junction itself, but gives limited capacity when approaching the traffic lights at the actual Borton Street and Borton Lane and Cripple Street Junction itself. So we've had discussions with some of the local members who feel that the predominant flow is actually vehicles travelling away from the Wheatsheaf and out of town along the Lewes Road. So what we are actually investigating currently is the potential for putting in a dedicated left lane at this particular junction down here. But again, because of the issue with land constraints and availability of the land to be able to provide that, it may prove challenging and difficult. So at this stage, I would say that this is a work in progress. This is perhaps not as progressed as the other three junctions within the Lewes Road corridor. But we are working hard to get this delivered in the same timescale so we can put it out as one scheme. So I welcome any comments on this particular junction.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we have had this discussion about the capacity. One of the issues that has been raised is the fact that with the two lanes on the northern carriageway currently, you sort of almost accelerate traffic towards the tailbacks that head into town, whereas in the southern direction, especially in the afternoons around 3 o'clock, you get a tailback from the Wheatsheaf down to Armstrong Road, and that tailback is essentially caused from the tailback from this junction back down to the Wheatsheaf. So if there is an opportunity to give more capacity on the southbound side to get more traffic past this junction, you actually don't have any bottleneck until you get to the Linton Crossroads. So you've actually got the ability to release more traffic along that part of the network if you can get more capacity in the highway to get more cars to the south of this junction. But we'll continue that discussion as we move forward. The one thing that we don't get from this scheme as it stands is any improvement on Cripple Street or Borton Lane. This is really just improving the flows on the Lewes Road, and it's a debate as to whether those flows should be improved on the northbound or the southbound. But at least there is some capacity that we can gain for that debate.
So back to my capacity question. So I think you're indicating that the Wheatsheaf works could actually deliver some extra, but this one remains the challenge because it's the tightest point in the pipe that's going to actually cause the problem. So this one still is a capacity challenge.
Currently with the forecasting that we've got, yeah, this one remains a challenge. We have actually had following some discussions that we've had with Mr. Clark, we've actually had some proposals come forward only today to try and get some additional capacity that we feel will actually improve what we've got on the table today. So again, please bear with us. This one really is a working in progress, but we are keen to progress this one as soon as possible. But yeah, the capacity improvements aren't as good as the Wheatsheaf Junction at this stage.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And once again, Russell, thank you very much. It's quite clear this evening that we're moving on at quite a great speed now at delivering these packages. I just want to echo a concern of Mr. Clark's. I understand that this is still at a slightly earlier stage than others. And there is a concern that traffic turning onto the main road from Cripple Street or Borton Lane isn't going to be quite as well addressed. Can we just make sure that going forward, or can you give me an assurance that going forward we might be able to do, or we will be able to do something about that? And do you have any idea sort of how much of an improvement do you expect there to be?
I'd like to give you that assurance. I can give you the assurance that we will try our best to give the maximum capacity benefits that we can for all arms of that particular junction, and we are actually working hard to try and deliver that. At this stage, you know, as we've already said, it is proving fairly challenging because of the existing alignment of that particular. If I could move one of the roads, it would be much easier, but unfortunately I can't. But we will continue to work with all the local members on this particular scheme to come up with a resolution that everyone is happy with progressing.
Next one.
I just wanted to show this one very briefly. This is actually going down into Shields Crescent, and as Mr. Clark has already rightly said, the proposal is to put a single lane from Armstrong Road Junction through to Shields Crescent with a altered priority system to allow better flow of vehicles going round into Shields Crescent itself. So I just wanted to give you a flavour. I mean, there's no actual physical construction work that's required for this particular improvement. It's all lining work, but I just wanted to make members aware that the proposal is to reduce the carriageway to a single lane between Armstrong and Shields Crescent, which has proven to be an extremely good use of the actual capacity when there's been utility works within the area, and has demonstrated that it actually works extremely well. So we're actually proposing to put it in as a permanent feature.
Councillor Bird.
Well, Chairman, I agree. This worked very well when it was trialled, and I'm somewhat surprised it's taking so long to implement. I mean, why can't we just get on with it? We all benefit.
if I may go back just now then to the one that I skipped to, unfortunately, the A20 Willington Street. As I was saying, this is the scheme that we are proposing to move forward with. It gives us a greater capacity benefit on for vehicles coming out of town, going towards Willington Street and beyond. And it was actually a proposal that was felt was needed from a local members working party when we delivered the initial scheme. By actually improving that capacity on that northern side, it does actually mean the moving of the existing ragstone wall on the Moat Park side. This does need a planning application, which is currently being progressed by our consultants to get that in as soon as possible. This does remain a risk, and members need to be made aware of that there could be objections to that planning application going in. We are aware already that there is potential for an objection due to the removal of the vegetation behind that particular ragstone wall. However, it must be noted that any vegetation that we remove as part of the careful removal and rebuilding of that particular wall can be replanted, and a planting proposal will be put forward as part of the planning application when it comes through. So again, this is a real positive. The only thing that I must mention is, because of other key strategic infrastructure projects that are going on within the area, this has actually been put to the rear of the construction programme for the reason that actually we don't want to block up Maidstone, and we want to be able to keep people flowing as freely as we can. So this one currently as it stands is September, October 2020 for a construction commencement, but it still allows us plenty of time to deliver within the local growth fund period, and allows us to deliver prior to the 2021 completion of that funding.
I think it is just worth saying that certainly in conversations I've heard at the Maidstone end, there is a lot of support to do this. And we know there are tough decisions about vegetation and the like, but I think there is support to deliver this, and, you know, providing things are reinstated appropriately, let's get on and do it. Councillor Mrs Prendergast.
Thank you, Chairman. I was really pleased to hear you say that there is a lot of support for it at Maidstone Borough Council, because you might recall that this junction, or the improvements to it, were removed from the planning obligations for a major development at the other end of Ashford Road, I mean Woodcut Farm, because it was going to be taken care of under this scheme. So I would really, ask everyone to remember that, and it is a vital piece of infrastructure. That's it. Thanks.
Next one, if you're ready.
Okay, moving forward. I just need to find the correct plan, if I may. I don't know which one it is. Right, I'm getting there. Please bear with me. It is on here, isn't it, Mike? It's not that one. You did put it on here, didn't you, Mike? Yeah. No. No, I don't think it is. No, it's not on. It's not on there. I can just talk through it if you want.
This is important, so let's find it. Would members like to take a 5-minute comfort break while the officers get the ducks lined up? 5 minutes. Can we return to our seats, please? Last call for returning to seats.
Hello, 1, 2, hello.
Okay, with some more to carry on with. I think you've found the file that you needed. Back and running.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and please excuse the delay, members, for finding the plan. So the scheme proposal that you see on the screen and also within your packs is for the A274 Sutton Road at its junction with Willington Street and Wallace Avenue. Members are probably fully aware of the history with this particular scheme, so I won't go into too much detail of what's happened in the past. What I will say is, following the last JTB that this was put forward at back in January 2018, there was a resolution to go away and look for a smaller scale scheme, retaining the grass verges and trees whilst paying more attention to the local pinch points, and it was inherent that some of the green verges will have to be removed. Now, based on that resolution that was passed by this board back in 2018, you now see a proposal in front of you that combines potentially elements from the 2018 scheme, but also elements from what was the original indicative scheme that was brought to the board back in 2015. And if I may, I will talk members through what you see on screen and in front of you. One of the benefits from the 2018 scheme was the offline bus stops as proposed in that particular scheme, and they have been retained within this particular proposal today. What you will see is the bus stop on the Bell Meadow side, so on the southern side of the Sutton Road, has actually been moved. Now that's actually been done very purposefully to enable us to be able to implement a much better planting regime and indeed look at the potential retention of the existing cherry trees within the section between Willington Street and Wallace Avenue. The proposal that you see here today is actually looking at widening into that grass verge still. You know, that we can't get away from that to actually try and get some capacity benefits. But by moving that bus stop away from that location actually gives us greater capacity to be able to put a planting regime that offers screening to the residents within Bell Meadow, which is one of the things that was raised back in 2018 when we proposed the original scheme. One of the other additions to this particular scheme is we're actually proposing to widen Willington Street itself. It will actually give us better capacity benefits on the approach to the traffic signals at the A274. But members are minded to note that this proposal requires the acquisition of third-party land to include the widening on Willington Street itself. There is the addition again of some minor widening on the northern Sutton Road Service Road side into that verge area, but again because of the scale and size of the existing grass verge on that particular side, we have full benefits to be able to put a planting regime on that side which will counteract any negative impact of removal of vegetation on the northern side. Moving forward from this scheme, we've had some discussions with one of the local members for the particular area regarding this proposal that you see in front of you today, and there's actually some amendments that we are looking to progress that are currently being undertaken as we speak. The bus stop on the southern side, so on the Bell Meadow side, we are looking to move even further away from that particular junction to allow us more benefits, and so any buses coming in and out of that stop don't get in the way of traffic or are able to get in and out of that stop if indeed there is a queue at that particular junction. So it's moving it away in a easterly direction from that particular junction. And indeed we are actually looking to improve on this particular scheme that you see in front of you today by actually putting in some additional capacity between the two junctions of Willington Street and Wallace Avenue by taking a touch more verge to actually give us some longer dedicated lanes turning left into Wallace Avenue as you're travelling towards town. And we are also looking at the potential for having that as a dedicated left lane with a left filter turn on the actual traffic signals themselves. The actual scheme itself, as people are aware, doesn't actually provide the capacity benefits that we would hope it to. Current modelling on the existing that you see here today actually only gives benefits up to approximately 2021. So a very limited amount of benefit for this particular scheme. Costs currently are standing at around the 2.5 million mark. Now I know that sounds, quite a lot for what is a small junction improvement. Unfortunately, based on the work that we carried out in the 2018 scheme, we are aware that there is a number of utilities that are located within the grass verge area on the Bell Meadow side that would still need relocating and diverting as part of this scheme. Therefore, that's why the scheme costs are that high. So this is currently a proposal for comment from members, but it must be noted that as it stands in front of you, the capacity benefits that we were aiming to achieve aren't realised with this particular scheme. Thank you.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of questions. Russell, I think there is a proposal that will be coming back regarding Gore Road, and I just wondered what impact that may have on the future considerations of what we're proposing here, if anything. That's one thing. The other thing was that we did, and members have identified the very obvious pinch points of the other end of Wallace Avenue by the BP, and I understood from conversations that we'd had that we were hoping to do something at that end as well, which is not mentioned in the report. Is that an oversight, or has that gone somewhere else? It's an oversight. It's an okay. So there is that. You might want to just comment on what we're proposing there as well. I do think that the third-party land in Willington Street is going to probably be difficult, but I think I really want to thank the officers that the way that they have responded to residents and the concerns that were brought forward for what is in terms of the vista that Bell Meadow provides, and coming up with a scheme that, to all sense and purposes, actually retains that. And I think the other thing that I know I mentioned to you, and I hope is will be, and a few pennies will be found, will be some nice fencing that might preclude somebody from selling cars on the in the middle of there in the future by giving us a reason to keep them off. I think this is a good progress from where we were before. I think it's clearly still a work in progress. But I would just wonder whether you could comment about what plans we have for public consultation to bring this forward.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. Yeah, just picking up on a few of your points there, and apologies, it was an oversight on my part. Absolutely, as part of this proposal, we have a scheme already designed, as has been shown to some of the local members, for a dedicated right turn lane into the existing petrol filling station further eastwards, and also we've actually extended that for a dedicated right turn lane into the other end of Wallace Avenue as well, and that will all be delivered as a package as part of this scheme. Also, you've mentioned the bollards or posts, and yes, absolutely, again, part of this scheme, we will implement those as part of that. The Gore Court one possibly hasn't necessarily been taken into consideration at this stage, but obviously now you've raised it, we can move that forward and just pass that on to our consultant, just to ensure that any proposal at that particular junction we're taking into account as part of this scheme.
There is a proposal that the Gore Court Road, Sutton Road junction be closed off and the traffic be asked to go through the new development and rejoin Gore Court Road and Church Road through that way. But it hasn't been agreed yet because it requires a traffic order, and that requires consultation. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you for that information, and I'll pass that on. With respect to the consultation for this particular scheme, as identified within the beginning of this, in the introduction of this particular report, this will be part of that consultation package that is going out for the wider picture for the whole of Maidstone scheme. So not only will you see the Lewes Road corridor, Cold Harbour, but this will actually provide the opportunity for residents and members alike to comment on this particular scheme. Now, that will include all of the information that I've described today. It will include the costings, it will include the potential benefits, or indeed the potential lack of benefits for this particular scheme. But that opportunity will come out in September with all of the other schemes when we're putting out that one whole package of consultation documents.
I think that is really useful that it is a package consultation, because the number of times I've spoken with residents and they say there's no point of doing that because it just backs up at the next bit along. And then when we look at the Lewes Road corridor, this linking in as well, it does begin to make much more sense. So I think that's a very good approach. Councillor Carter.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I mean, my comments are generic to all of the schemes that we've discussed tonight. I mean, I think Russell Borman and Lee Birchall, who helps and supports me through the South East LEP in making sure we keep these projects alive, have done a stunningly good job. And I think we're making public money go a long way in this series of integrated transport packages for Maidstone. We did get the agreement of the South East LEP Accountability Board to VAR between the various projects. So we've got flexibility, which enabled us to go through the process of acquiring the Wheatsheaf pub, which enables us to do a much better job of the Wheatsheaf Junction, which is, I think, as everybody would agree, a very agreeable addition, and still be able to deliver the totality of these packages within a sensible budget. So I'm enormously grateful. I think we all should be for a set of schemes that are well thought through and we can now start to get on and deliver. So I'm personally delighted in the progress we've made. We do need to get them all completed by the end of 2021, or we might lose some money, but I'm sure we've got the capability of doing all of that. Thank you, Chairman.
Very encouraging words. Councillor Chittenden.
Sorry, Chairman, could Councillor Bird just go first? He's got one quick comment and then I'll go on from there.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like a little bit of clarification on the process. It relates really to the LEP. What we have here is a scheme which has very little sustainability. I mean, it's, you know, it will reach capacity within a couple of years. and yet that seems to be acceptable for let finance. But at previous meetings where we've looked at the proposed improvements at the Hermitage Lane, Tunbridge Road, Fountain Lane junctions, which have got much greater sustainability, they have been deemed to be unacceptable for the left. And I get very confused by this. I mean, if someone can explain, I would be very grateful.
Just for clarification for Mr. Bird and all members within the room, this scheme proposal for the A274 is not to use LEP funding. The proposal that you see in front of you is to use the Section 106s that have been collected or are being collected. Currently there is a shortfall of funding which is being sought from other areas of KCC currently, and we're hoping to fill that funding gap. But for clarification, we are not using local growth fund for the delivery of this particular scheme.
Chairman, if I may, I don't think it was ever part of the integrated transport packages that we bid for under LGF. Was it 2 or 3? I can't remember. But the Hermitage Lane one was never in that package. The ones that we've discussed tonight were the original schemes, I think I'm correct in saying, that were always thought through in the proposals that came against the £10 million that we secured from the South East LEP. But it's great we're going to do the Hermitage Lane one as well. We've got to find a way of doing it with through different funding channels.
Okay, Councillor Chittenden.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, mostly I agree with what Councillor Carter said, and I think the officers are doing a good job, but with the exception of this particular item, this particular scheme. And just a thought that if we're looking for a place for some money, I think Bearsted roundabout junction 7 is still short, and maybe that's a good place to spend it if we're able to do so there, or some of it in case we can't spend it on these other schemes. I'd like to come back to this Sutton Road scheme. I must admit, when I first saw the report, I thought something was missing on it. I couldn't really believe that what we were doing here was putting up something that can only work till 2021, when we were really looking something that needed 10 years, perhaps to 2031. I do remember when the officers last brought it to us, or first brought it to us in January, February 2018, we were told it could not be reduced substantially. That was what I was being told for many, many months, right through to even this year, but somehow we now seem to have found a way forward, even though, to me, I can't understand why we're looking at something that's got such a short lifespan. I can't accept, Chairman, that what is proposed here, and what I'd like to do is make the following motion, because I think we have to really think carefully about whether we accept this, because it doesn't seem to meet any of the criteria that we need. I think it's absolutely essential that this junction forms part of the work we do. It's absolutely essential, including the bus priority system, which we'll be part of, and I haven't quite sussed out how that helps, this current design helps with that. But I would like to put the following motion for consideration by this board. That this board rejects the junction improvements proposal at Willington Street, Wallace Avenue and Sutton Road, as it provides little long-term benefit, while the requirements for third-party land purchase adds considerable cost and risk. That the original proposal presented at JTB on the 17th of January 2018, providing long-term congestion mitigation, be brought back to an urgent meeting of the JTB for reconsideration. And it is now clear that an alternative design with comparable traffic mitigation and value for money cannot be achieved. I do have copies if officers want to hand them out. If not, I'll bring one around to you, Chairman.
It would be useful for the clerk to receive a copy.
Okay.
Councillor Carter, are you indicating to speak again, or?
Well, no, I mean, remember the debate well, where we got all parties' support that the original proposed scheme back in 2018 was totally unacceptable. We had a whole series of residents here, gave very good reasons as to why it was unacceptable. The junction improvements that are now before us tonight actually do more, I think, than the original drawings. They give, as Mr. Borman has said, the enablement to come up Willington Street and have 2 lanes to go both right and left into the Sutton Road, because at the moment you've only got room for about 3 or 4 cars to turn right before it backs up down Willington Street. That will be able to filter in both directions continuously. And indeed, we've now got the solution that we always said needed sorting, was the pinch point outside the SO garage. And that has now been resolved. You could put in the other scheme whatever you wanted to put in it, but they hadn't solved or cracked the problem of the SO garage. And it was supported by all parties of Maidstone Borough councillors. I seem to remember it was almost a unanimous decision in this room. I say almost, maybe there may be the odd member that didn't support it. And I think this does everything that it needs to do. And hopefully we can now move ahead with the integrated transport package, which I think is a really good package for the whole of Maidstone. And I can't work out what is motivating the Liberal Democrats to be difficult.
Councillor Kimmins.
Yeah, sorry. Start off with an apology. I'm very new to this. This is my first time at this meeting, but I always read it and see it say it how I see it. One thing I see a lot in the reports are value for money. So how can you justify, now it's going to take until next year to build this scheme, because I know how long consultations go on for, and so you're going to give 12 months for £2.5 million. That doesn't work out, I'm sorry.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chairman. There's not much more to add from what Councillor Cancer said in terms of the consultations, the representations that came back. I think this is a vista that people will see as they're coming into Maidstone. It is an incredibly attractive stretch of road. And what we were seeking to do last time, and which was overwhelming, it wasn't unanimous, but it was overwhelmingly rejected by this board, was the rejection of what was essentially a 6-lane highway along the Sutton Road. And that's... and you know, I do recognise that that clearly there has been a desire on the part of some members to keep going back to this question of a bus lane along the Sutton Road. That is not going to happen. We are looking at elements of bus prioritisation. And one of the comments I've been making to the officers is to get dedicated left lanes and filter lanes, which will actually move things along quicker. And I think there's an opportunity. This is still a work in progress, and I think it addresses what, by the officers, it addresses what we as a board asked them to do. It would be remiss of us today to effectively say, well, we didn't mean what we said last time. It would be incredibly remiss and suggest that we go back and say, well, let's just go back to what we refused before. So I hope members will just vote down this motion and note the progress that we're making. Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Borman, what happens after 2021?
The current modelling shows that you would be back to the status quo. So the capacity or the overcapacity that the junction is currently existing will be the same as it is now.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I was at that meeting and I did try to make an amendment because I did feel that we were trying to constrain officers by insisting that a lesser scheme be developed. And I did say at the time that I felt that we were trying to do some sort of junction design on the fly by committee. I would have much preferred officers to have the ability to go away and reconsider the scheme with its full mitigation, because that's really what we're trying to achieve with all of these junction improvements. This is the unusual one. We've actually got significant pressure on this whole corridor. It's going to get worse. We've got more plans for housing that are going to be built out as part of the local plan delivery. This is going to take us to 2021. If anyone goes anywhere near this junction, Wallace Avenue is an absolute nightmare. If you join the queue on Wallace Avenue to get out to Sutton Road, to get to Morrison's around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you may as well do a U-turn in the road and go all the way round. You may as well cut through to the Parkwood Industrial Estate and turn left at Birchcott Road, because you'll get out there quicker. This is £2.5 million worth of public money, and this is an absolute folly. The fact that we're looking, it's 2019 now. By the time it gets delivered, it will be at capacity. We're talking about 2021. We're not talking about 2029. If I was a developer and I was looking at this and I was to say in planning we were beaten and beaten and beaten for all the money that would be needed to improve capacity from the large amount of housing that we were proposing, and this is what you came up with, I think they would have due cause to say, why were you requesting a certain level of mitigation when you come forward with this folly of a scheme? So I do support this proposal. Nobody has said anything about bus lanes. Nobody has said anything about politics. Well, perhaps one person has said something about politics, but I don't think that's the reason behind the objection to this scheme. It is the fact that there's a high risk. It's even been mentioned that there's a high probability that we may not get this public land grab that we need for this scheme. So we've got the risk of delivering a scheme that will be at capacity at 2021. It could take that long for us to deal with this land grab that's part of the scheme. I absolutely feel this is folly.
Councillor Carter.
Well, you know, I'll say it again. This has many advantages over the previous scheme, which did have virtually 3 lanes on one side and 3 lanes on the other, that ended up in a single carriageway by the BP, now SO garage, had nothing to do to solve that problem, nor did it do anything at the other end when you go down towards Morrison's. So you were just creating a car park, desecrating the landscape and the banking around it for no good effect. We've now got bus stops off the main road coming up. We've got the availability, turn right, turn left at the Wallace Avenue junction in both ways, and has many advantages. Whether or not it's 2021 or not, it would have been the same for the other scheme, I can assure you of that, because that was actually a worse scheme than this that would have cost many more millions of pounds of money to deliver the full-on scheme that came in 28. Make no mistake, with retaining walls and concrete, as a result of this, we've been able to find the money to acquire the Wheatsheaf pub and deal with the real pinch point in this area of town, which is improving that junction. So I've, hearing a lot of tosh, frankly, from the Liberal Democrats. Let's just get on and do it.
I'm sorry, Chairman. I've not even spoken yet, and you're throwing us all in one pile. Okay, this is maybe a non-political forum, and you're making it one.
Councillor Chittenden.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to clarify with Mr Carter, he keeps mentioning it's politics. If anything, it's no good for us by worrying about it, quite honestly, because if by pushing for something that's going to actually last for 10 years in that area, we're going to lose votes. We're not going to gain votes. I'm not doing it because of that, and I'm doing it because I actually believe that if we've got a scheme that's only going to last for 2 years and cost us £2.5 million, at least we had a scheme that is going to last for 10 years. And that's what we look forward. We spent 400,000 on specialists to look at it. As for this business about a bus lane, we, the Liberal Democrats, put in a petition of 800 people 3 or 4 years ago. It was supported by all parties, and that was rejected at that stage. And it's certainly rejected now, and bus prioritisation is the only thing in town. So, Gary, please stop saying that. It's not true. I'm not changing my mind on this, Mr. Chairman. I want to see it voted on. I don't see that this is of any benefit. I do see that what we have shown is what I thought we were doing in January last year, was giving the officers an opportunity to look to see if it was possible to get a better scheme which could still provide the same benefit. That's what I'd understood when it went away. I couldn't hear, it wasn't my fault that the next 2 JTBs were cancelled seemingly for lack of business, which I could never understand at that time. But Chairman, we really, this scheme is just unacceptable. The officers have tried their best to find, and I know they have tried their best to find improvements to the existing scheme to get the same benefit, and they haven't been able to. And I think we really have got to accept that. I suppose the one thing that comes to my mind, there were many of these schemes. When we first started this 4 years ago, we thought, yeah, this is going to be easy, this is going to be... What we all realise that in our areas, it's going to cause problems with residents, and of course you don't. And a lot of work is done to improve that relationship with residents, and it's much needed. But you can't, if you like, make omelets without cracking eggs. Even if it's the Ashford Road, Willington Street, we've got to crack an egg there. We know there's still something to come there. This is another one. And we're the same with the wheat sheaf. So, Chairman, I stand by what I've put through. I'm hoping that this board will recommend that we look again at the scheme that will give us at least 10 years.
We're entrenched. A valid point of information.
Yeah, it relates to this question of a bus lane or bus prioritisation. And it was clear, and it was clearly stated in public papers that formed part of the Maidstone Borough Council's case under the judicial review, that a lane of bus prioritisation, which would be dedicated for buses between certain hours in the morning.
I'm the chairman, Clark, not you. You may continue. Let's hear the debate on both sides.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a point of clarification. It was clearly stated in there that that it was sought to have bus prioritisation, which would be a lane that was dedicated for the use of buses between certain hours of the day. Outside of those, it was available for use by the general public. Those lanes, wherever I've seen them and anywhere else in the county, what it says on the road is bus lane. By any other word, that is a bus lane, and that's what was stated very clearly in the judicial review papers, which were public documents. So I'm sorry,
Okay,
Mr.
so
Chitterton, you're
I'm going to
wrong.
make the point that we're not discussing what was stated there. We're discussing this scheme, and we're considering it against the scheme that was previously presented. Mr. Borman, did the 2018 scheme have a bus lane in it?
No.
Thank you. I think we will need to move to the vote because this will go backwards and forwards. But I have a question on this scheme before we go ahead. So, approaching this junction heading towards Maidstone, you have the nursing home on the right. Currently, there's a dedicated turn for the nursing home, followed by a dedicated turn to the junction of Willington Street. Both zones are currently full, and the consequence is people pull up onto the grass verge on the left to navigate around. What you're showing us on the screen, is any of that different?
Yes, slightly. What we're proposing to do is actually slightly move the carriageway to the south to move things over, but also the amendments that we're actually looking at is actually to give more capacity through that junction as well. So that situation that you've just described that is existing won't be an effect if this scheme was implemented.
And after 21?
It may do.
I think we need to move to a vote. This motion as put is very specific to this junction. So you've nothing else to present, so we need to wrap up the whole item. There is more consensus this evening, this afternoon, than there is disagreement, because I think all of the other schemes have had widespread support. So I actually would like to start, if you would be prepared to suspend your motion for a moment, with a motion from the chair is actually saying that this board supports all of those other schemes listed.
Agreed, Chairman.
I'll take you as a seconder to that, but let's actually build on the consensus that we do have. So this board records its support. You are entitled to do so.
Chairman, my amendment is exactly what you said in terms of but covers all of the schemes in the report. Not now.
Let me just read the precise words so I just understand whether it's amending or standalone. Bear with me a moment. Make a suggestion, Councillor Clark. Let's be constructive, find a way forwards. Councillor Cook, I think.
Clearly, since January of last year, officers have done they've done what officers do best, and they've tried to come up with some solutions. And they've come up with some elements to this scheme which are beneficial, including the turn into the petrol station, the turn into Wallace Avenue, and some elements towards Morrison's. Now, would it be beyond the might of man for officers to take the original proposal and look at ways in which they could be open to the ideas of those benefits being added to that scheme, which would further mitigate traffic at this point? Because I feel that if there are elements to this that have been built upon since January of last year, I think we should do due diligence in adding those to the scheme if we can. But that will give us the maximum mitigation in an area where we really do need maximum mitigation.
I think reality check is we had that scheme and we had detailed evidence showing how it provided capacity, and we asked the question, is there a reduced scheme that can do it? And we were categorically told no by the officer. Nonetheless, both sides rejected that scheme at that time. It was cross-party. I actually abstained, but the rest of you all... But anyway, but we were told clearly then that is the only thing that will make a difference to the traffic. So what we have in front of us today, we are being clearly told it lasts a year or two and we're back to where we are now. That's what we're being told. I think the officers have done a very fine job, but I don't think we can be selective about which bits we choose to acknowledge in their report, which bits we don't, because it does say, 2021, it cuts out. And it's a crunch time of do we make a decision. Look, we're going to go on and on. The proposal is public consultation. There's lots of opportunity to get response from both sides. So I am going to put that standalone proposal to the vote, and then based on the outcome of that, we will wrap up with a further proposal that encompasses the other junctions. I will read this proposal, which is standalone, and it was proposed by Councillor Chittenden, seconded by Councillor Clark, that this board rejects the junction improvements proposal at Wellington Street, Wallace Avenue and Sutton Road, as it provides little long-term benefit, while the requirement for third-party land purchase adds considerable cost and risk. That the original proposal presented to JTB on the 17th of January 2018, providing long-term congestion mitigation, be brought back to an urgent meeting of the JTB for reconsideration, as it is now clear that an alternative design with comparable traffic mitigation and value for money cannot be achieved. Those in favour, please indicate. Those against, please indicate. I don't believe there are...
Must be an abstention. Is that an against? Are you voting against? Okay.
I think we've got that, but for the record, abstentions, none.
4-7 against 8, 0 abstention.
That defeats that motion. I'm looking for a further motion. All we were asked to do today is to note this report. Is the report noted, members? Noted. Thank you. That concludes that item. Agenda item 16, B2246 Hermitage Lane A26 Tunbridge Road project. Mr. Borman, is this you or your colleague?
Thank you, Chairman. This particular scheme is in relation to the 2246 Hermitage Lane and A26 Tunbridge Road, including Fountain Lane. Members are reminded that this particular scheme was removed from the MIT package of works due to the lack of demonstrable benefits and good value for money. Following on from that particular JTB, we met with local members and formed a member-led working group from both Maidstone and from KCC to look at viable options to be progressed utilising the Section 106 contributions that have been gathered and to be gathered for that particular junction. A number of options were looked at that can be seen in Table 1 of your report pack. I won't go through all of those, but you can see we exhausted absolutely every single possibility that we could by looking at all of the available options for that particular area. It's probably worth pointing out at this stage that this is an extremely challenging area to solve in terms of capacity. It's very constrained in a built-up environment that you just don't have the availability of land that you can utilise to give capacity benefits. The working group proposed 2 schemes out of the 7 options that we were actually looking at, and they were given a do minimum and do maximum status. Option 1, which was the do minimum, was basically to look at the opening up of the St Andrews Road that is currently closed off to vehicles. That would be a one-way street for vehicles turning left from Hermitage Lane, going along St Andrews Road and continuing then on down into Maidstone. Through the working group, it was felt that the one-way of Fountain Lane was not acceptable, and that was to remain two-lane. But by opening up the St Andrews Road, it actually freed up capacity at the Fountain Lane A26 Tunbridge Road junction, because you were removing any left turn movement over and above any heavy goods vehicles that were using that particular part of the network. Having said that, there is an existing weight restriction from the quarry down to St Andrews Road itself on Hermitage Lane, and this would be continued along St Andrews Road to ensure that no heavy vehicles utilise that particular area. We also looked at the other constraints that were contained within the wider area, and it was noted that a couple of bus stops that were in close proximity to the Queen's Avenue junction also contributed to some of the congestion that was being affecting the peak period traffic. And it is proposed to actually move those offline to be able to free up capacity for vehicles travelling into Maidstone along the Tunbridge Road. Option 2, which is the do maximum, drew on the original indicative scheme and actually looked at a widening element of the Hermitage Lane, which would utilise areas of the existing heathland. It would also require the removal of some of the existing mature trees at this location. In conjunction with that, there was also some bus stops on the Tunbridge Road between Fountain Lane and St Andrews Road, when we were proposing to move those offline also to give us additional capacity on the A26 itself. We've had some modelling done, and within the report you'll see that unfortunately, due to slow mobilisation, we had to use some data taken from traffic assessments from local developers' planning applications. However, as of today, and I can verbally update today, we've actually had the traffic data that we collected for this particular site to actually run the modelling exercise on both options, and it has concluded the exact same findings that we found with the TA assessments that we'd utilised for the production of this report, that actually both options only give a 3 to 5 year benefit in capacity terms, and therefore the recommendation, unfortunately, from Kent County Council at this time would be not to move this particular scheme forward due to the low benefits of the actual scheme and the high cost. And also there is a funding gap between what is to be collected for the Section 106 monies and also the scheme construction costs that you see within the report. Moving on from that, we have agreed with the member-led working party to actually look at the use of the Section 106 funding for this particular junction and see if we can implement a crossing at the St Andrews Road, Heath Road junction, and something else, I've forgotten what now. And the use of the intelligent traffic signals linking the existing Heath Road traffic signals with the A26 Fountain Lane signals. I know this will come as a shock to some members and not only residents alike, that this is the recommendation, but obviously currently you know, as with any schemes within the Maidstone Integrated Transport Package, we've got to demonstrate that there is a good use of that money and the capacity benefits are being realised. Now, if members see fit for us to further progress these two options, then obviously that could be a recommendation from this board. But as it stands, we are recommending that this particular junction improvement ceases at this stage.
I've two visited members that are registered to speak. They go first. Councillor Harper.
That was a very interesting introduction by the by the officer, especially when one just goes back to the discussion about Sutton Road and Willington Street and Wallace Avenue, where you've decided to go ahead with a scheme which only will be out of capacity by 2021, probably out of capacity before the road junction's actually built. Now, you know, so that's okay there. But where we are, when we go over to West Maidstone, we seem to have no solutions at all. You know, this is, I mean, reading this report, you know, and I know there's residents here tonight, and people over in West Maidstone will just look at this with amazement, really. We're paying our council taxes. Hermitage Lane is the equivalent of Sutton Road and Lewes Road for the residents of West Maidstone. I'm sure a lot of the councillors here will use Hermitage Lane on a regular basis. I speak to residents quite frequently who can be delayed in buses going to Pembury Hospital for an hour or more because the buses cannot get through this junction. We talked earlier on this evening about rat running through Fant, and the prime cause of the rat running through Fant every single day of the year is this junction. People rat run all the way through from Glebe Lane towards the town centre to avoid this junction. This is one of the worst junctions we have in Maidstone, and we're being told we're not going to do anything. What I find, another thing I find actually quite amazing is Kent County Council at 2 public inquiries in the last 2 years, your highways officers stood up in public inquiries in front of planning inspectors on the public inquiry in 2017 on the Fant Farm proposal and the public inquiry on Jubilee School held only last year, and we're explaining the fact that the mitigation in terms of the additional traffic both those schemes would bring to the area would be met through adjustments to this junction. And a year ago, your officers were explaining to a public inspector that some of the improvements would be through extending on the eastbound and the westbound side of this road junction on Tunbridge Road, the filter lanes. And they explained quite clearly to the inspector that extending those filter lanes back on both sides would increase the capacity of this junction, and that on that basis it was fine for the Jubilee School to triple in size from one form entry to 2 form entry. And on the basis of that, and that was one of the reasons the planning inspector gave permission for that. Now, I said at the time, people locally didn't believe that, and now we're being told Kent County Council blatantly lied. You know, we're now going to have to live with the consequences of this. There must be solutions to this. We heard also about the wheat sheaf, where you're purchasing the pub, which was a bottleneck for that junction. What's the difference with this junction? Spice Fusion, that block, creates a similar logjam to here as the wheat sheaf pub did to the other junction. I'm not suggesting, I think there are options available. The use of St Andrews Road is definitely not one we would support, and I don't think would be supported locally, but there are options you could do if there's a will. And just finally, I just, having listened to you lot tonight, I do wonder if politics does come into this. I'm afraid we're all politically elected, or you are, I'm a visiting member. But I just think about the politics of this. We have a lot of Conservative county councillors and district and borough councillors. Sorry, you might not like this, but you're going to listen to it. Living down Sutton Road and Lewes Road. There's no Tory councillors on the county.
Your microphone has been switched off. Councillor Atkinson, you're also registered to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, I agree with what Councillor Harper has said. I mean, I'm particularly disappointed about the filter lanes in Tunbridge Road because they only allow one coming from Tunbridge Road from the town turning right only allows for 2 or 3 cars. So if you get more than that, there's a massive tailback of vehicles, which surely that bit could be widened or lengthened so we could actually get more cars in there. But I've got 1 or 2 suggestions for sort of simple, and they may well be cheap solutions to solving some of these problems. I mean, Fountain Lane, for example, when you're coming down Fountain Lane, there's a left lane, but often people in the left lane actually don't turn left, they just carry straight on, which I've experienced that several times myself. Suddenly I'm going straight on, someone from the left cuts me up, which is potentially quite dangerous. So would it be possible to put in Fountain Lane a sign which simply says left lane must turn left? I think that might actually sort of stop some of the incidents which I personally have seen. And also the left filter light at Fountain Lane is really hard to see when you're in the front vehicle in that road. So I wonder if there's a way of making that easier to see. Maybe a bit like the French do, have a little set of traffic lights lower down, right in the driver's eye line. So that's one suggestion. Then when you're coming from Farley Lane and Fountain Lane and turning right from either of those, it used to be the case that you could sort of go sort of back to back, so the traffic didn't get stopped. Now, when they repainted it, the traffic has to go round, which then means that traffic going straight ahead often can't get through because of traffic turning right. So there's a tailback sort of which actually goes across Tunbridge Road, which is potentially dangerous itself. So, I mean, I know there's a technical term for having the cars sort of going sort of back to back or side to side. I can't remember what that is, but I mean, it was like that before they repainted it. Why can't it just go back to that? I mean, that would only cost sort of a tin of paint, essentially. So those are my sort of cheap suggestions for improving that junction. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is that something you can comment on, Mr. Borman?
Thank you, Chairman. I think what actually needs to be made fairly clear about all the work that we've carried out, and indeed the previous work that we carried out within the Maidstone Integrated Transport Package, there is actually a solution for this junction, and that's a double roundabout at the A26 Tunbridge Road, Fountain Lane junction. The reason that hasn't been progressed, unfortunately, is due to the requirement for third-party land. It would be a very long, drawn process to get that under CPO. Therefore, that's another reason why it was removed from the MITP and wasn't considered at that time. Also, there is a funding gap within the current Section 106s. So if we were looking to progress this as an option, as a solution and mitigation to the development within the area, there would almost certainly need to be further development to fund the shortfall of the Section 106s. So there is a solution to this. It's a challenging solution. It's one that may not be met with great acceptance, but there is a solution. So, you know, ultimately we can move things forward, but we need the funding to do so, and also we need the agreement to move forward purchase of an acquisition of third-party land. In answer to some of the other points raised, yes, we have looked at the hooking, and I know Mr. Bird and the working party have discussed this at length on the actual Tunbridge Road and where people sit to actually turn, whether it's back to back or front to front, and that's something that we can look at. Similarly, that some of the suggestions about visible signage and lane discipline and everything else can also be taken into account. It doesn't go, anywhere near to solving the capacity issues that we're trying to resolve there currently, but obviously we can take that forward. But I just want members to understand that there is actually a solution for this particular junction, but unfortunately the decision potentially could be that it actually needs further development in the area to actually deliver.
Councillor Hodson, I was actually going to take next.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It's too late now, but I can't hold that higher enough because I needed to speak on the last subject, and I would not have been accused of bringing a political level into the debate, as was suggested by the visiting member. Can I just ask through you, Chairman, who are the councillors on the working body? Fine, that's good. I thought it was probably...
Can we speak that so that the microphones hear it and the public get the answer? So, yeah, so Councillor Bird, perhaps you could round that up for us.
If I may, it was Councillor Daly, Councillor Vizard, Councillor Kimmins, Councillor Gooch, and myself.
Fine, okay, well that's very helpful, and thank you, Chairman. Now, in the light of the letter we all received today from the St Andrews Road Residents Association and St Andrews Road Action Group, so that I can get a bit of a feel of this, and I'll come back to the history of this site, which those of us been around long enough, we do know from papers how long it's been going on. What relationship, what responses have the working group of 4/5 members had with these two bodies?
Councillor Kimmins, if you would please.
Yeah, I do believe I've only been elected just over a year, so I haven't had any dealings, but Councillor Vizard has. And I've actually seen the paperwork where he has been involved with the St Andrews Road Group? Yeah, in 2012. Yeah.
Councillor Hodson, are you finished now, or are you? Councillor Bird.
Chairman, I was going to speak, but I think it'd be helpful if I first clarify for Mr. Hodson where we were. After the January JTB, we were advised that these junctions would no longer be included under the LEP scheme. We did set up this group with the officers, and I'm grateful to Mr. Borman and his colleague for all the work they have done. And we, being the elected members of the local area, took the view that we should reconsider all, and I mean all, potential options for improving those two junctions, because we have an obligation to look at the needs of all the residents in the West Maidstone area that we represent. It was always intended that the report, a report, would come to the Joint Transportation Board at some point when the officers had undertaken the research and the analysis. And clearly, any proposal, on any scheme would go through a normal public consultation. But there wasn't any interaction with any group of residents during the course of the previous 6 months. That would have been wholly inappropriate. And the lobbying that I have received in relation to this scheme only emerged in the last 10 days.
Well, that's helpful for information, because I always, on matters where it's not my patch, like to hear what the local councillors say is. As I listened to Councillor English when he was in doubt somewhat with the new cycle path provisions at Moat Avenue. I listened to him, and I've yet to see a cyclist, and I pass it every day. Having said that, this has been on the agenda, on and off, for several years. And I can remember 5, 6, 7 years ago saying to officers, go and buy those 3 properties, because there were 3 properties on the market at that time, on the junction. And I think that would have, hindsight, been a solution to a lot of the problems here. Now, we've heard the update today, and as I've said when we saw the original A274 scheme, I did not think that that was an appropriate scheme. I said, however, you must be able to come back with a revamped scheme. And I still think that there must be action on this. I agree with the visiting member that this junction is as important and as busy as other junctions in and around the town. So I understand there is a way forward. You have said there's a way forward. More housing to supplement the £2.5 million missing funds, etc., etc. I just think that you, as I say, exactly as I said for Willington Street, you've got to look at it again and come back with another option.
Councillor Carter, I'll let you in now and then I'll come back over to this side.
Yeah, no, I mean, I apologise. I was thinking the other end of Hermitage Lane, not this end of Hermitage Lane at the Tunbridge Road neck of the woods. And, you know, I do now recall that was a scheme that was in the original integrated transport package. I didn't realise it had been dropped off the package. And I agree with Mr Hodson that we do need to look at this. I remember the meeting well when we suggested we needed to buy what is now an Indian takeaway, I think, or a restaurant or whatever at that junction. And it's a shame that never happened. And I think that we do need to find a sensible solution to that. I'm very happy to look at it again. I've been down the Aylesford end of Hermitage Lane, not at this end. So, you know, I think, you know, the same rules apply. I have no favour of any particular scheme in any part of Maidstone. We need to get it right wherever we possibly can. And this is a junction that was identified by us all as something that needed improvement. And we need to work on an affordable, sensible solution to improve the junction. And I'm very happy to look at the costs with Mr Borman and others and find out what we can potentially do about it, which hopefully will be supported by the community. And I'm not quite sure where St Andrews Road is, but I think I know where it is, or close or whatever. But let's look at it again.
Councillor Daly.
Well, thank you, Chairman. I declare straight away I've represented this area next May for 30 years. So I think I do know something about it. And this has been an ongoing thing for 30 years. The clue is in the name, the lane, Hermitage Lane. It's the only north-south connection in the whole of Maidstone between the A26 and the A20. That's the only one. It has a major hospital smack in the middle of it. And it is a major hospital in every respect. And the way in which it's doing specialist operations and things in that area means that it has to be accessible easily. We've had over 4,000 homes built in that area in the last 15 years. There is an opportunity to build yet another 840 of them at the northern end of that lane if Tunbridge and Malling Council's planning department has the opportunity to do that. What is it that could stop this? And the only thing that could stop it is every time there's a planning application, the Kent Highway say enough. Enough is enough. They don't use the word severe, because apparently that's got a particular definition in planning terms. I don't understand it, because when severe means you don't move, that's it. You don't get any further. St Andrews Road was closed off originally for a very good reason, basically because the Queen's Road, Fant Lane, Tunbridge Road, and the Big Tunbridge Road junction didn't work. So it was closed off. To open it up again would be stupid, absolutely stupid, because all it would do would break the other junction back to what it was 20 years ago. So that is just definitely out. These proposals in the papers today, in fact, are a step forward, in my view, because everything that's put down here is just factual. But it doesn't actually go that extra bit to say, in future, there will be no more development in this area, because the junctions are already over capacity. We've seen tonight, you've got to double the Cold Harbour roundabout at Junction 5 because the traffic down that particular stretch of the road is demanding it now. There is going to be Section 106 money released from this if we don't do any of these options at the moment, about £2.5 million by the look of it on here somewhere. There is a proposal somewhere in the line that the hospital itself has got a proposal to take a road from one of its areas out onto the Queen's Road, giving a relief for perhaps buses and blue light operation only. I don't mean general traffic. To relieve the junctions, because the junctions are over capacity, but the junction at Fountain Lane, right down to the A26, has got to take the traffic which comes from south of the river, across the railway and up there. You know, that's another added to that. And the linkage of those traffic lights between Heath Road and Fountain Lane and Junction and the A26 are essential, because that's an intelligent way of reading the traffic. Now, that's got to go ahead, but I was delighted to see that, in fact, at last we're going to get a safe way of getting people across the road at the Heath Road, Fountain Lane and Hermitage Lane junction. Yeah, but that's got to be traffic lights with people able to press the button, and when you have those put in, it does the pedestrians' safety a lot of good, but it doesn't do anything to the traffic flow, because it demands an extra time for that traffic to be able to be stopped to let the people get across the road. We've got schools in the area and sinkholes in the area. Now, the sinkholes are not good for traffic movement, are they? We had Tunbridge Road, 5 months it was closed for a thundering great sinkhole. At the top of Hermitage Lane only about 12, 15 years ago, there was a sinkhole so big a JTB disappeared down it. And that area is still full of sinkholes, or capability of sinkholes. It's geologically unsound. Geologically unsound. And only last week, Upper Fant Road is closed because of a sinkhole. And that's only just about 20 metres down the road from Tunbridge Road. Now we're talking about more, you cannot put any more houses in there. And the other problem for us, of course, is it's right on the border between Maidstone Borough and Tunbridge and Malling Borough, two totally different planning authorities. Hermitage Lane goes through the border twice on its little way. It's not a very far way, it's about a mile. But if you try to go down Hermitage Lane at 5 o'clock in the afternoon northwards, the queue starts at the Fountain Junction, all the way down. And it just beggars belief that we're thinking in terms of any more expansion of anything else. And at the bottom here it says, the working group will continue to assess minor works to the current operation of junctions using Section 106 money available. Initial options being considered, including the realigning of the Tunbridge Road. And yeah, all these things are possible, but these are mitigations on top of mitigations. And you cannot keep mitigating mitigations. I don't care where you come from or how clever you are. So if I can just say, Chairman, can we please just say thank you for the report tonight. All these options are scrapped. Yes, fine, good. Let's get on and spend the money that we have got in sensible ways, like, for example, looking at a new way of getting out of the hospital into Queen's Road. But the hospital want to do it now, but the hospital have been slow in the past, objecting to planning applications coming through. But if highways keep on just allowing it to happen without saying enough is enough and no more, then, and we can stand up, all of us at appeal, when they come down and the inspectors come, telling us what to do with our local plans. I really am, as I say, I've had 30, I'm prepared to go on for another 30 if anybody wants to have a go. But the thing is, this has got to stop. But can it stop tonight, Chairman, with the acceptance of the papers we've got here? And let us get ahead with this. But St Andrews Road cannot and must not be opened up again, basically because it didn't work last time, and that's why it was shut up. Thank you.
Councillor Bird, perhaps.
Chairman, it's getting late, and I think we all want to move on. I mean, what's clear and very disappointing, and I think very frustrating for the visiting members and Councillor Daly, myself and others, is that for so many years we have been told by developers that they can mitigate these junctions, and that the Highways Department have accepted the developers' proposals, and on that basis there's been no objection. And of course we now know, and we learned 6 months ago, that this mitigation isn't going to work, and of course we've done more work. I'm going to take Mr Carter to his word, and perhaps, Mr Carter, if you will permit me, Chairman, we could meet up with the Cabinet member and Mr Borman and talk seriously about not only how best to address the existing problems, but how to prevent the problems getting any worse, because that is the really positive step forward. And on that point, Chairman, I think we've had a useful discussion, and I've nothing more to add.
I think this becomes very contextual to the next stage that Maidstone face. You know, we know what the government's telling us to do. If we can, and I'm talking about the local plan and the pressure for more development, but if we can front load that with understanding exactly what these highways issues are and work hand in glove, then we can have a joined up response to a logic of why we can or we cannot receive the housing. But we do need highways absolutely working with us all the way along. Some places it may be possible, some places it may not, but we need to front load the process when we get to that stage of the plan making process where we're looking at a spatial distribution and potential sites. So it's a plea. Let's really work together on that. Councillor Bird.
Just to add, of course, as Councillor Daly has mentioned, yes, there is pressure within Maidstone, but the key pressure now in west or northwest Maidstone is coming from Tunbridge and Morling, and a lot of the traffic from Tunbridge and Morling and from Maidstone, which is work related, goes into Paddockwood and into Tunbridge Wells and so on. I mean, you know, we never consider here the Wateringbury lights. That's a disaster area, but it's outside our patch.
I think that even links further, and let's not extend this too much, but when you start thinking of access to the A21, the south of Maidstone, cutting across the Farley bridges, leading into this junction, it's a huge issue. But let's work together on this. Councillor Kimmins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, I'm ward councillor at Heath Ward. 2015, a disabled lady by the name of Lizzie Hare handed in a petition to this committee, which was to get a crossing put in by the Fountain Lane junction at the top of St Andrews Road. Now, it is a route that is used for both schools either way. Well, two schools one way and one school the other way. And I was under the impression that that was actually granted, and we was going to put that in out of the 106 money. But that doesn't seem to be materialised, and we're going over old ground now, trying to spend the 106 money that should have been spent on that crossing back in 2015. The money's still there. So obviously I'm questioning that. Also, volumes of traffic are denoted by the AQMA, and the air quality in Fountain Lane is at maximum. It's between 38 and 40, and I've checked the tubes. The only time it did take a dip was when there was a massive, great big hole in the road. Now, that was because the traffic obviously was diverted, couldn't come down and use that part of the Tunbridge Road. That might have done us a favour actually, because I think you'll find the pub's starting to slip into the hole that was there, and there's a massive crack in there. So if you're keeping to your word, I think the pub is actually on the market to be sold. So that might do you a favour in the long run. One other question I would like to ask, we have got problems with the air quality, is our KCC going to put in objections against any of the building development or further development going on? Now, that's me asking a question. Are you going to put those objections in or not?
I'm not sure that that's simply answered. Mr. Borman? So, you may not have heard that, but Mr. Borman says I can't answer.
Yeah, the only reason I asked it, obviously, I sit on planning, so I can't be predetermined in any way, but I'm asking as a question because every time that I've actually sat there, I've never seen an objection on traffic issues, that's all.
Well, just a point of clarification, if I may, Chairman. Come to Staplehurst, sir. You will see objections from highways and you will see planning department override those objections.
We need conclusion on this item. I wonder whether the working group want to move anything.
Chairman, I think at the moment all we can do is note the report. I think and encourage officers to continue to look at options for improving these junctions.
Members, is that noted? Agenda item 17 is the Maidstone Highway Works programme. It's for your information. It's not intended for discussion. You've received it with the papers. Is that also noted, members? Noted? Thank you all for your time, your deliberations and your considerations. I call the meeting closed.